afternoon, everyone. We are in our committee of the whole meeting of Tuesday, April 10th. Halton Squall, increased to Squamish, away on Whale. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda in front of the committee. Looking for a motion to adopt. Moved by Councilor McNaught, second by Councilor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed if any, motion carries. First up, we have a delegation, information on BC Heritage Fair. And there's a whole bunch of people, so I'll let maybe Bianca introduce everyone, or they can introduce themselves. Come join us at the table.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to refresh your memory, my name is Bianca Peters, and in this role, I am the president of the Squamish Historical Society. I'd like to introduce you once again to Cindy Rowell, who is a director with the BC Heritage Fair Association. And also, once again, to remind you, our wonderful relationship developed between the Squamish Historical Society and the BC Heritage Fair in 2016. Just to remind you, this lovely logo of our community when we had the Squamish Culture and Heritage Festival. So we're very excited to announce that, or just to remind you that we've got 60 students coming from the the BC Heritage Fest Fairs that will be happening throughout the province. They'll be coming from July 4th for the next 5 days. And I guess I should turn it to you. Oh, one thing is too, I was not made aware of the council meeting last week, and I would like to thank you very much for the proclamation you made. Mm-hmm. But if you could remind me what that proclamation was, that would be fantastic.
I could look on my agenda, but I think we declared whatever weeks you were asking as BC Heritage Fair Week.
Congratulations.
I'll have a quick look here. It says, District of Squamish BC Heritage Fair Week on July 4th to 8th, 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's exciting. My name is Cindy Rowell, and I'm back again. I was here in December and actually announced that Squamish was selected as the host city for the provincial fair. So what we're here for today is to give you an update on what's happening. I just wanted to introduce a few people that have joined us. Kevin McEwen is our BC Heritage Fair Society coordinator, and Betty Adamson is with Squamish Historical Society, and Donna Wall and Eric Anderson are with the Sea to Sky Forestry Center. So we've been working quite closely with a number of associations in Squamish to put together our program. So BC Heritage Fairs is a non-profit society, and we receive funding from corporate donations and the province of BC and do fundraising events to cover all the expenses for the kids to come to the regional heritage fair. So I just want to take you through what our days look like. We've confirmed some things, and some things are still kind of to be confirmed. But on Wednesday, July 4th is our travel day. Students from Fort St. John, Hudson Hope, Prince Rupert, Terrace, Prince George, Kelowna, and Kamloops will arrive at YVR and transported to Quest University. Delegates from Abbotsford, Langley, Surrey, Richmond, Vancouver will be bused from Abbotsford with the different stops along the way and arrive at Quest University, and everybody should be there by 2 o'clock. We'll have 65 students, 65 people, including chaperones, and they're going to begin their Provincial Heritage Fair adventure that day. Students will check in, get their room assigned, and will be given their coveted Heritage Fair t-shirt, which I have last year's. That was one. And so we have really bright colors, so when the kids are out in the community, they're spotted by the community, and also for us, if a kid's wandering away, we can spot them right away. They're also given a backpack as well. And so those will be used on the days that we're in and around the community. The backpack's really handy for the kids to carry their water and stuff. Once everybody's arrived at Quest University, the students will get to know each other, and with that we have alumni students that work with the kids. These are kids that have been to the fair previously and know what the fair is all about. So they kind of get the kids networking, getting to know each other. The first day is really the toughest for the kids that come in because they don't know anybody. All these kids are from different areas in the province. So it's kind of a way to get the kids to know each other and get connected. So that night, once the kids have arrived, will be a safety meeting, of course. We want the kids to know about the safety features up at Quest University. We'll have some of their staff address them. We'll talk to the kids about what we expect from them, because this is the first time that our board has actually met the kids, so we need to get to know them too. Students will have a welcome dinner and a tour of the campus, and at that point they'll know some of the safety features of the campus as well. In the evenings, the kids are encouraged to write in a journal, and we do have a journal. This is the one from Victoria last year. So it's got a few pictures from some of the places that we visited, and it gives them a chance to jot down their thoughts. They can draw little diagrams if they want as well. But that we encourage them to write in every night. So day 2, we're up early. Of course, breakfast is at Quest University, and we have a jam-packed day of touring. Day 1, the bus picks us up at the university, and we're off to West Coast Railway. Tammy from West Coast Railway has put together some activities for students to participate in, and we'll be visiting the Squamish Historical Society Museum as well. The alumni students, which are the older kids that have been to the fair before, they're going to be challenged in the rail car escape room. So we're going to put them in there, and the other kids are going to tour around the site, and we're going to see how long it takes them to get out. At 12:30, we're picked up by the bus and taken to the Sea to Sky gondola. There we hop the gondola for our 10-minute ride up 855 meters above sea level with the breathtaking view of Howe Sound, majestic coastal forests, and surrounding mountains. Lunch will be provided to the students at the top, and then we begin our tours with the Sea to Sky gondola people, and we've met with them this morning and have an awesome program lined up for the kids. 5 o'clock the bus picks them up, and we're off to the park. I'm not sure which one yet. We're open to suggestions for a barbecue dinner. After dinner, we're transported back to the university, and again, the alumni students will lead the kids in activities. There will be time again for journaling, and like I say, we always encourage the kids to write every day in their journal with stuff that's fresh in their mind. Friday, we're off to Totem Hall. I've been and still in the process of talking with Donna Billy to put together activities and tours for the students. At this point, we know we are scheduled into Totem Hall, and we will be doing a weaving activity. The kids are going to make friendship bracelets, so I'm sure that's going to be a big hit. From there, after we're finished at Totem Hall, we do our harbor tour with Eric, and he's got a bunch of stuff lined up for us to do the harbor tour. And then our tour will wrap up about 4 o'clock, and students will go on the guided tour of downtown. So this is a chance for them to kind of look at historical sites right downtown, as well as a little bit of souvenir shopping, because that's one thing when we ask the kids after we've done the fair, what would you like to see more of? It's like, more shopping, we want to do shopping. So it's really good, because today when we visited Sea to Sky, there's a little gift shop. At Britannia Mine, there's a gift shop, so the kids will have lots of opportunity. They don't have to bring money with them, but on the average, the kids do bring spending money for little souvenirs and tokens. So then we're off to Saturday, which is our big day. We have our showcase happening, and we have actually talked to Britannia Mine. So our showcase of the Kids Provincial Hair projects will be at Britannia Mine in the machine shop. We were just there this morning. We will have opening ceremonies that will commence at 11 o'clock. And we're inviting the public. We've already had some press releases out talking about inviting the public to this. The ceremony will be led by First Nations elder. We'll have the kids piped in. There'll be dignitaries that will address the kids. And following the opening ceremonies, we return to our project displays that are set up, like I say, in the machine shop. These are amazing projects. These are the best of the best. These are kids from all over the province that have won awards for their projects. So I'd like to be the first to extend to you an invitation to see the projects on that day, Saturday, July 7th, and also to the opening ceremonies, and we will have more information coming on that too. Once the showcase is done, like I say, the kids are going to be at their sort of workstation or their display board from 12 till 3. Once they're done, the projects are torn down, and then they will have the tour of Britannia Mine. So we've worked with them. They've got a great program that we're going to work with them to get the kids through the mine, probably about 3 hours. The delegates will then be bused back to the Quest University, where they'll get ready for their big banquet. And this is the big wind-up banquet. That it's kind of the last opportunity for the kids to say goodbye to the friends that they've met all during the week. So we have the big buffet dinner for them. They get their certificates. Last year, a couple of the kids got up and actually spoke and thanked the board of directors for the great time that they'd had. And once one child started, it just kind of followed, and we were having speeches from the kids. It was amazing. So that we're working with West Coast Railway. I contacted them to have our banquet in the Roundhouse. And that was the only weekend that they did not have a wedding booked. I said, we'll take it. And prior to us being there, apparently they have 100 school students coming in, so there was kind of a problem booking a wedding there anyway. So this just kind of fell into place with Tammy, like it was awesome. So that's our big wind-up day, and again, we would invite council if they wanted to attend the banquet and talk to some of the kids maybe, or listen to their speeches. We would welcome that. And then Sunday is departure day, so kids will be bused back to the airport. The Fraser Valley, Lower Mainland kids will be bused back to their areas. And that is the whole 5 days in a nutshell. So the kids are going to be really, really busy. We do a group picture of the kids, and this was the one that was taken last year, and it was taken at Government House in the Gardens. And like I say, the Lieutenant Governor is our honorary patron, so we have invited her, but there's a big changeover coming with the new Lieutenant Governor coming in, so we're not sure if she will attend, but she did attend last year. So if she does attend this year, we've said to Britannia Mine that there would be certain protocol that we need to work with them on. So in talking to Bianca, we've discovered that it's your 130th birthday this year. So I have a proposal that I would like to present. And it is in regards to designing, having someone, a student in Squamish, design our shirt for this year. So I've got sort of some brief outlines. I wanted to run it past you first before I go to the school board, but we would get the information out to the schools, and the kids would have a choice of designing their project on a template similar to this. We would collect them, and we want to display them in the library and have the public vote on which one they think represents Squamish the best. So what I've come up with is we want to invite students to participate in this unique competition. This is an opportunity for all students in grades 4 to 7 in Squamish to reflect and connect through art by designing a community stamp. We want students to capture the diversity, history, and heritage of Squamish and depict elements of themes that reflect the Squamish community. The stamp should include elements that are unique to your community, such as historic landmarks, events, relationships between land and people. So that's kind of what we're looking for. There's also a written summary that we want from the kids explaining why their picture depicts Squamish in such a unique way. So what we're looking for is like an okay to do this. And also I'd like to propose to council that they consider sponsoring the t-shirts and backpacks for the kids for the fair.
Thanks. It sounds like a jam-packed week. A few things, just curious, it's 130 years since the first settlers came, correct? Obviously, First Nations have been here for a lot longer than that. So on that note, there's a First Nations welcome and all that sort of thing incorporated into the event.
Yes, and that's in the works.
Of course, make sure, yeah. Assumed it was such.
And we had the same type of thing when we did the fair at Brennan. Is it Brennan?
Brennan Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Every event that we host
Exactly.
historically, we have to obviously recognize the First Peoples.
And so just and that's just in terms of the sensitivity of how we communicate what our anniversary is. Just to make sure that the First Nations acknowledgements are appropriate there. Because certainly we've been a community here for a lot longer than 130 years. But on the funding of t-shirts and backpacks, we'll have to actually get a number. You've sort of missed the grant application deadlines for that stuff. Council has a little bit of contingency, so we need to know actual numbers,
I
and
have.
we could bring it to a council meeting in the future to consider. We can't really do that at committee, but if you have that number, maybe present it to Christine, and then she can put it on an agenda for council to consider at the council meeting. Just off the top, how much is that?
$1,500 for backpacks and t-shirts.
Okay.
Yes.
Council Kent?
I think, do you have your hand up first? Oh, okay. I think it's great. I love the idea of having the kids have it be judged in the library. I think it's a great idea. We get a lot of significant traffic through there. My boys will be sad because they're in grade 3 that they miss out on some of that design. You mentioned about suggestions for your park barbecue.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, because you'll probably be bringing those people in by bus, there would be a parking issue, so I was thinking maybe Rose Park. Because you've got by the ropes course there, you could get some buses into that.
Most of the busing is just dropping off and picking up,
Right.
and the school district is supplying buses for us. As far as we know, because the school's over, their buses we have access to, so we're paying for the driver and the fuel for that. So a lot of it's drop off, pick up, but if we
But
can.
Rose Park's a good suggestion.
Rose Park, you got the room to get a bus in and out of there. And the other thing is too, if you got a bunch of young kids and they get a little bored, they can watch the aerial ropes course with people up there. And also there's some shade with trees, et cetera, in there, and there's a nice breeze and all of that. So it offers and it's in a fairly substantial space. So that might be a good choice.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's what I was looking for, was some feedback.
Any other questions at this point?
I think I missed this. How many students are coming?
There's 12 regions and 4 to 5 kids per region. So with chaperones and kids, we're housing about 60 people up at Quest. So
And do we have any Squamish students participating?
we do. There is a fair happening on May 25th at the Whistler High School, I believe. And all the kids are coming together. It's more, they haven't done a school fair, they're just basically bringing all the kids together, and then there will be some kids from Squamish going to provincials. One of the concerns that the school board did have was that, our kids have already been to Britannia and, West Coast Railway and all that. So what we said was, that's great, because now they can be, mentors to those kids and tell them what, they can be prepared to look at, and maybe give them a bit of history themselves. So I don't think that the Squamish kids by any means are going to lose out by doing the Sea to Sky Gondola and Britannia Mine and stuff like that again. So.
Yeah, and I think I agree with the mayor, just making sure that we distinguish between the history of this locality and this.
And
White
Bianca
sand.
hasn't actually seen this yet. I just kind of put it together in the last few days, so she will go over it and revamp it. But I knew that it was some kind of 130th celebration. So.
But just to be a know-it-all, so in 1888 is when the first 25 white settlers settled in our community, and in 1958 is when we had the opening of the highway, and they celebrated then. And then we created a coin and had a huge big festival, Centennial, and that's why there's Centennial Avenue and all that sort of thing. In 1988 was the 100-year anniversary of the first settlers, and there was lots of stuff being done for that as well. So we absolutely do respect the First Nations and recognize them in everything we do, but in terms of, as is the community for the new pioneers, if you will, it's 130 years. So we're recognizing that.
I know, I just would hope in the contest that we're encouraging children to represent all history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why we're working with the
Yeah,
First
so
Nations.
the contest
We're very
isn't,
sensitive to that.
the t-shirt contest isn't necessarily 100% reflect the 130th
No,
year anniversary.
oh no,
Yeah, yeah.
no. It
So-
reflects Squamish.
Whatever that looks like to those individual kids. Yeah, so absolutely, I think it's great to go out. Is there a monetary prize that they get for winning this, or what's the incentive?
They get their design on the t-shirt, and then they would be given some for their family and things like that. Squamish really doesn't like to have competition within the school district.
Okay.
So that's why we have a problem running it as a contest with prizes. So it's more just the fact that they get that on there, the t-shirt. On the journal on the back is also the t-shirt design and the written portion that they've submitted as to why this is unique to their community. So it is a great opportunity. Like I say, we give them to the families and things too. The other thing that the kids do when they come in from all these different regions is they have pins from their community, And a lot of the evening is trading pins with kids and dickering back and forth. So a lot of the regions will give, the firemen will donate pins to the representatives, the police, city council. We usually have pins and things like that.
We
So
can give you lots of pins.
yeah, so there's lots, and last time I was here, I picked up the sticker that I was wanting to get more of that says I love Squamish, because that will go inside their backpack, along with other information from around the community. We looked at the Sea to Sky gondola information, things like that, information about the university, just basically information about the community that the kids can read in the evening as they're kind of winding down from their day's activities.
And Tourism Squamish can help you out with stuff.
You've been in touch with them.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's 2 girls that I've been working with.
Awesome. Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're really
I have to
excited
dust off
too.
my Leonardo da Vinci costume and wear that.
There you go.
We want to see your old
We can
project
fit
about
that.
capital punishment.
Yes,
Oh.
capital punishment.
Take that one out.
Well, that was,
It's a challenge.
the other one I did was, I redid little models of all of Leonardo DiCaprio, Leonardo da Vinci's inventions, so.
Brilliant.
And
my
you have
partner
been
might have
studying?
I know, I was a geek.
You have been studying for, are you smarter than a 5th grader?
I will definitely guarantee I'm not.
Bianca's the champ, you might want to network with her a little bit.
Now that I know what's up, I'm gonna go by and
You're
Yeah.
not even smarter than a
cheat sheet on my
3-year-old.
hand.
Okay.
Sounds great, fantastic. Any other questions, council? Looking forward to it. We've already made the proclamation, so thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome,
Thank you.
thanks. Moving on the agenda, we have our real estate facility strategy. Leon.
For that. Never have this thing once. Just ready to go right now. It's set, ready to go.
We're a little bit behind, I don't want to rush this conversation, but just to give staff a bit of a heads up.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Neil Plumb, Manager of Real Estate. This is Lorette Swanepoel from Stantec. And Stantec's been working with us on this project right from the very beginning. So we're here today to present to Council the real estate facility strategy for the District of Squamish. So today I understand time is tight, so we will move through as quickly as possible, but we'd like to just set up the stage a little bit by just quickly going through what the purpose and the process of the strategy was, some findings that we had about what we have and what we need for the future, the gap between those things, and the recommended strategies and action items that come out of the strategy, next steps and implementation, and then hopefully at the end we have council's endorsement of the strategy. So the real estate and facility strategy is the next step in the district's overall asset management plan. And the goal is to ensure that we're delivering services and infrastructure to the community in a fiscally responsible and sustainable manner. And as I said, the real estate strategy in red just shows you that it's on the list now. And the goal behind this is to support our decision making around real estate facilities. And you can see there's a variety of other plans that have already been done that are feeding into the overall asset management. I won't go through them individually, but those are some of the key asset categories we have. And there's more plans in the works as well, so this is just how this fits into the overall process. So in terms of the actual real estate facility strategy, the first thing that we did was we looked at our current state. What do we have? And that included looking at our real estate portfolio from top to bottom, our financial capabilities and resources available, and looking at how we manage our portfolio right now. And then we took a look at the future state, which we're calling what do we need. And there's been a wealth of community engagement that's been done by the district over the years, and we looked at every plan, OCP, master plan that was done to get an idea of what we might need to consider. And it went back quite some time. We also did staff interviews with all of the managers who were responsible for the various service areas of the organization to see what they were reacting in the current world and what the future might entail. And from that, you obviously end up with a gap usually, and so and we're not different. We have a gap between what we have now and what we need. And so the goal of this real estate facility strategy was to figure out how do we go forward from here. And that included recommended strategies and actions to support those strategies, and then what the next steps in implementation might look like. So in terms of what we have, I'm going to walk you through a series of slides showing all of our existing facilities. I'm not going to speak to each facility. I know, as I say, time's tight. But as you run through them, we've identified the age and the square footage of each facility. And if there's tenants in the facilities, we identify the tenants as well. And what you'll notice as you go through it, that many of the facilities are significantly into their age categories. They're 40 plus years in several cases. You'll see Brennan Park makes a big significant portion of the portfolio, and you will see obviously there's a variety of tenants in the facilities. And although it's not specifically noted in these slides, there's almost no vacancy in terms of our facilities. Basically, they're all virtually full. So I've grouped together here our protective services facilities, the 2 fire halls, and the RCMP building. Obviously, fire hall number 2 at the 40-year bracket. Municipal hall is ranging from 2 years, which is the trailer on the middle drawing there, which we've just installed in the last few years, to 42 years for the main building and the engineering trailer. And Municipal Hall obviously houses a variety of district departments and council chambers. Brennan Park, we have obviously our main community center and rink. It's 40 years old. It's 40,000 square feet. We've got a couple of small tenants there from a telecommunications perspective. We've got our aquatic center, which is a bit newer, but also getting into the years there. And we also have the concession and parks office, which is located off to the west of the main structures, and those facilities are 45 years as well. And partly the reason why we're setting this up this way is if you get into reading the details of the document, this also identifies which facilities are showing up in a lot of the tables and things. These are 3 of our facilities that see a lot of public activity in use. Public library next door from here is 21 years. The 55 Center is relatively new, and obviously the Adventure Center out on the highway. You'll see the Adventure Center has a service agreement with Tourism Squamish to run the visitor center and the gift shop, and we have a variety of tenants in there providing services inside the building. We have also facilities that we have that were to support external groups that provide services that aren't really in our mandate, but they're important services to the community. And that includes the youth center, the Junction Park building, which currently houses the Arts Council, and the homeless shelter / drop-in center behind the library. And all 3 of those facilities are getting to be quite old. And we also have 2 facilities that were originally purchased for potential future needs. And one includes the forestry building across from Brennan Park, and the Cleveland Avenue restaurant, which is known as the Copper Coil. And obviously there's no district operations in those facilities. They're fully tenanted at this point in time. In terms of land, I understand this slide is a bit busy, and I'm not expecting you to read it. I'm not going to walk you through all of it. It's just we have a quite sizable portfolio, about 1,400 acres of land scattered across the district. And I just really wanted to show you here that in a snapshot that we've kind of broken those lands into sort of 6 categories. Lands that we use for our own operations, lands that we lease to third parties that in a lot of cases provide services that we don't provide but are important to the community. We have some land that's vacant. We also have land that has come to us through a variety of means for the preservation of green space, parks, and then we also have a significant amount of infrastructure. And although we haven't documented all the infrastructure lands, there's a lot of roads, dikes, utility right-of-ways that we manage and look after as part of our land portfolio. So in terms of what we need going forward, we started by initially reviewing the RDH facility assessment that was done in 2011. And that study identified a minimum of $18 million worth of capital or upgrades to the existing building systems, roofs, heating systems, plumbing systems, and to our existing buildings across our portfolio. And that was just for renewals. When we looked at that investment, our first thought was that it was not recommended we move forward into that space right now in terms of those investments, because those investments do not include upgrades for seismic. There's not any real modernization of the buildings or building code issues. And they don't really allow us to address any capacity issues in those facilities or meet future growth. So the next step was that we did an assessment, an update or up-to-date assessment, preliminary of all of our facilities. And we looked at not just the age of the facility, we looked at where they're at today in terms of capacity, what kind of functionality the buildings are providing, and when I say condition, we looked at what level of investment might be required for the facility as related to the value of the building and the age of the building. And when we did that, we identified 13 out of the 18 facilities as being candidates that could either be replaced or expanded or upgraded. So the next step was we put these facilities into 3 categories: existing facilities that we might consider replacing, existing facilities that might need to be expanded or upgraded, and we also looked at some new facilities that might be coming based on our review of the future and in our documents and plans. And we tried to put some preliminary numbers on what these facilities might cost to create. It's important to note it doesn't include any land costs, it doesn't include any increased operating costs or repairs that might come with those facilities, but it gives an idea of what it might look to construct them in here and now. The other thing is there are contingencies built into those numbers when we're looking at some of these, so they're just, at this point, really just preliminary estimates. And you can see that there's a potential sizable investment. When you add those categories up, it doesn't take long to get to $100 million plus to meet all of these needs as they're identified at this stage, at the preliminary stage. In terms of land, we did the same thing for land. We looked at what our future land needs would be, and we found that the land needs group themselves into sort of 4 categories again. We see the potential for a significant amount of acquisitions, and a lot of these being sort of linear strips to support our infrastructure. We have diking needs and utility needs, and some of our existing infrastructure is already in the ground and they've been installed based on informal agreements in the past. We need to go in and get those cleaned up, and with future growth we're going to need more as well. We haven't been able to identify what the investment level would be for these, given the number, the sheer volume of them, but that's something that we'll be starting to work on very shortly to try and quantify that. Nonetheless, there will be some addition to the investment on the land side. So in terms of the gap, when we look at the 3 categories of facilities and land, as I said earlier, that is estimated to meet all those needs that are identified today, could be in excess of $100 million. And in terms of what we have right now, in the financial reserves, we have a land reserve that currently is sitting with $10 million in it. We also have a borrowing capacity to look at, but right now there's a obviously $90 million gap between what we have in the bank and what we would need. In terms of long-term borrowing, it's not practical to use all of that to bridge the gap, given that there are legal limits on how much we can borrow. Right now, when you work out other capital needs in the organization, it looks as though there's plus or minus $4 million per year of borrowing available to go towards this gap. But it's important to recognize that for each $4 million that's borrowed, there's a 1% tax increase for every year of that borrowing. And typically our borrowing is for 20 years, so that would be a tax increase of 1% for 20 years. We do own some real estate that could be non-operational and surplus that could help bridge this gap, but we need to do some more work on that to figure out how much of that land is truly surplus. So based on that table there clearly identifies why we need a strategy to go forward. So the strategic goal outlined in this document is how to move forward with managing the district's lands and facilities to meet our community needs within our resources, or otherwise put in the most fiscally responsible and sustainable manner. So embedded in this document is there's 6 key strategy areas, and they're identified on this. We're going to speak more of this as we go forward, so I can appreciate it may be a little hard to see this, but there's 6 key strategy areas, and there's 25 supporting actions for those 6 strategies. And the 25 supporting actions sort of fall into a handful of groups there. There's 7 groups listed on the right side there. And so given that there's a significant amount of options to be considered, analysis to be undertaken, and decision-making that lies ahead, we felt it would be most appropriate to move this whole process forward in a timely, focused manner if we summarize those strategies and the supporting actions that support the decision-making, that aimed at minimizing investment and utilizing best practices into strategic principles. And we've done that to provide focus and to condense it, and we've actually, in your report, we've brought that into 2 pages of strategic principles, and I'll hand those out in a moment. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Lorette Mayer, and she can walk through this, or if you feel it's appropriate to stop and pause and ask some questions, I'll let you give us direction on that.
Okay, so the first principle here around prioritizing needs. The objective really here is to establish what your priorities are for not just the facilities and the investment that lies ahead, but also for the land, so that you can make it happen within the limited resources that you have. So we have proposed a framework here to help guide the decision-making as part of the upcoming master plan process and moving forward, to try and identify some criteria for how you could decide what is more important than some of the other investments might be. So we're looking at criticality to your mandate as an organization, and as we know, as residents ourselves in communities, there are many things that our residents need, and it's not a matter of whether something is important or not to the community. It is more a matter of how critical is it to your mandate as a local government to deliver and play an active role in that. So you'll see within mandate criticality, there's 3 buckets there, what we might call core services, critical services, core services, and some support services.
Can we just make sure Haley gets one of those? Thank you. Sorry, go on.
So once we kind of have an understanding on the list of needs, how critical it is to the mandate, we can use the driver as a secondary category to help prioritize. And so some of the things we look at in the driver category is there's a little bit of an order of priority there. So if something is regulated, or you've already committed to doing it, of course it has to be at the top. If there's some facilities or things reaching end of life where you're really at risk of losing a service if you don't act, that's a high priority. Legitimizing assets has to deal with, especially on the land side, maybe some areas where you're vulnerable, you don't have right-of-ways in place, so there's a bit of a legal risk there. Opportunistic or pressure is got an asterisk because it's a bit of a dangerous one in that we can use it as an excuse to bump something up the list very easily. But it is really trying to get at when there really is opportunities for synergy in projects that can actually help us do things in a very cost-effective way, or it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If we don't act now, the opportunity will not be there again for the community. So I won't run through all of them, but that is essentially the framework that we're using to suggest not a linear list of start at number 1 and work your way to bottom, but at least to help inform your decision making of creating a bit of ranking amongst all the things that's on the list. Second principle is to manage your facility investments. Really making sure that existing facilities are optimized to reach their full lifespan, and optimizing the investment in the new facilities that you are looking at. So the first action there, to minimize the investment in replacement and upgrades, new facilities where possible. And I just want to clarify that this one does not mean not to do something. We're not trying to say here, decide you're going to do one project and not do another project. It's trying to really look at what the costs are in the projects by deferring components or looking at temporary solutions. For instance, you might not have the money available to build the facility in the next 3 years as the need is identified. There could be some temporary solutions like looking at a trailer for the next 5 years so that you can deal with some other higher priorities, and it just buys you a little bit of time. Of course, looking at some other partnerships and means of funding, or can you meet some of these needs through leasing instead of owning a building? And increasingly we see more communities move in that direction as well, to not try and own all their facilities, but partner and lease from others. The last bullet there I just wanted to quickly mention also is eliminating the service. Of course, as part of your asset management work and looking at your financial health as a community, the important question is always there, do you really need this? And is it your role to provide it? And sometimes the service is no longer needed or optimal, and there should be some room for eliminating if possible. The second action there is making sure that you follow some good business case approaches by looking at these facilities. And while we see some of the numbers for construction of new facilities, it is important to remember that the construction cost typically represents only about 20% of the cost. And there's still operations and maintenance cost involved in that investment that you will be making. And so making sure when we look at these facilities that we are not just considering the upfront cost, but asking the question, can we afford to make sure we manage this facility over the next 40, 50, 60 years of its life. For the facilities that you have in place, and as new facilities come on board, we proposed setting targets as part of how you want to maintain that facility, so that that can provide the facilities manager some direction in terms of what your targeted investment is, and provide some feedback on whether you're starting to move into a more reactive approach to managing your facilities. We know that it doesn't necessarily save costs to defer on maintenance. It can reduce the life of the building, and we want to make sure that we stay as close to optimal maintenance as possible to make sure the facility reaches its end of life. There's a number of facilities that's being leased. In some cases, as Neil pointed out, you have existing buildings that fulfill a function like Brennan Park, and there might be small spaces within that. In other cases, you own buildings in its entirety as a leased building. So recommending that the district takes a look at its leasing approach, and just making sure that when you enter into leases that it really supports the community's needs. In some cases, you might want to reevaluate the cost recovery that you're getting from those leases. Again, considering that the ownership of a building can get quite expensive, especially as you start to think of your responsibility as a landlord in having to replace that facility as it starts to age. And given the age of a lot of these leased facilities, that will be a key consideration in terms of your responsibilities as a landlord to be able to provide proper facilities and care to your tenants. A lot of the leases are very long-term, and just making sure that there's some clauses that can give you an out, because the focus ultimately of a lot of the leases is to support the community without necessarily burdening the community in the process financially. So if you have some buildings where you had to design for increased capacity over time and there's some space left, of course that space can be utilized by some of the groups. Then principle 3, optimizing the existing facilities and land that you have. So there's a lot of district-sponsored Crown land that you have acquired from the province. Those cannot be sold for other uses. They are limited typically in what they can be used for. And so it provides a real asset, a land-based asset in the community. And you want to optimize using that land as much as possible because it doesn't cost you a whole lot or anything. And the master planning for Brendan Park came up as a key determinant in this work as well, in that it is such a large facility. It has the potential to really combine and explore alternate uses in the community on the same land base and in the same building even. And with its great location, really needing to explore through that master planning process how to leverage that facility better. Principle number 4, minimizing your private land investment. Of course, there's a lot of potential always in owning land, but there's also a lot of responsibility as far as owning land. And the strategy is proposing that acquisitions of private land should only be for specific operational and community purposes that you can anticipate, and to steer clear from speculating with land. And when you are going through the process in the master plan of investigating what facilities or what infrastructure needs you are applying to the land, there's a hierarchy proposed in terms of making use of your sponsored Crown lands, of course, at no cost, or Crown lands at reduced costs, and essentially working your way up as a last resort to private land acquisition. The same holds true for affordable housing. Trying to find avenues to provide affordable housing that is not dependent on private land acquisitions. So that might involve picking up units through the rezoning process, partnering with the Crown on some of their land, looking at partnerships with organizations such as BC Housing and others. And any time there is a sale of any of your land, of course, you can place that onus on the developer as part of the land sale as well. Number 5 is increasing available capital. Clearly there's a need for more money, and helping to identify where that money comes from. Identifying the external funding sources will be key. Neil talked a little bit about the tax situation, and while that might be part of the equation, it can't be solely done through taxes, and there will be a need to identify partnerships, public partnerships like with BC Housing or the YMCA, potentially some private developers in some cases, looking for grants and other creative opportunities such as naming rights and sponsorships. Identifying the district-owned real estate and deciding a bit of a process in terms of do you sell, do you hold? That is always a key question with anybody holding land. Land gives a great long-term security, but it also is a resource available for times when communities need the infusion of some cash. That is the reason a lot of communities keep some of that land around, and this, given that you have and own some land, you do have the potential to investigate that as part of your capital solution. We've proposed there an outline of a diagram in terms of how to try and inform that decision making, and essentially if land does not have a clear identified operational purposes or long-term strategic use, it will start to find its way, at least on a candidate list for discussion with council and community. When land gets sold, making sure that you optimize the value you can get for that land, whether that includes upzoning, subdividing, providing infrastructure, adding additional clauses to the sale of the land for affordable housing or community amenities and investments that you need out of that. Just making sure you maximize the return on that investment that you've made. And then lastly, just as an interim principle, between now and the completion of the master plan, 3 kind of key actions: that the district will not acquire any property unless it is at no cost to the district, that you don't complete any significant repairs or so repairs to the facilities or major investments into facilities that's on that replacement list, unless of course there is a health, safety or other real key reason to do so. And that is just, of course, not wanting to spend on a facility that might in the next 3 years be demolished. And not to enter at this point in any leases and licenses without some due consideration.
Okay, and I'm just going to walk you through now the proposed implementation going forward, and we're actually getting close to the finish line here. So pass this out because I know it's hard to read on the screen. So right now we're sitting at the very top of this chart, and that is where we're in front of you right now, hoping to get adoption of the real estate facility strategy. And the next step in the process is to move towards creating a real estate facilities funding master plan.
Big piece of paper.
Yeah.
I thought I'd leave it all to the end. That's all right, Ted?
We're almost.
Yeah. Your first time at this one.
Okay, so next step up is for us to move forward to complete a real estate facilities master plan. And that's showing up, the next step in that process is to do some further due diligence. Shown in this bubble area here, circle area here. Before we were ready to finalize the master plan, we needed a little more work around what the project investments and funding costs might be for some facilities. We need to look at our portfolio and see which properties we realistically could potentially sell. Do a scan and see what kind of funding there is out there to help offset the gap, and how much support we might be able to anticipate from the Crown in terms of their land. Under step 1. And then under step 2, we would look into looking at, with all that information, we're in a position to look at all of our options and see where we can maybe reduce or defer, what trade-offs start to appear between facilities, and start looking at business cases for each investment. And once we're done that, then we are proposing to come into council and have a workshop or series of workshops where we can come in with all the information and sit down and look at what the options might look like, start to confirm priorities that may be required, and look at how we may then take all this information out to the community for community engagement. And then, number 4, we would go to the community at that point. The exact community engagement plan hasn't been established yet, because that's likely going to come out of stage 3, or phase 3 in that circle, once we sit down with council. but it could include looking at different service level options, how the facilities are gonna get phased. Obviously, Brennan Park is a really big part of this equation, and so there's a community engagement campaign that's gonna be launched very shortly on that, which is gonna have a lot of insights for us. We may look at other facilities, amenities in the downtown area as part of a civic block project, and looking at financing options as well. So, and once we've done that and completed that stage of community feedback, then we will create a real estate master plan, which is very similar to, as we showed in the very beginning, as to the other master plans that we've created. And that's going to tell us what facilities we need, when we need them from a phasing perspective, and how we can fund them what funding we can bring to the table from external sources and potential sales. That information will then get fed into the long-term financial plan, and that's where then the real estate needs starts to stack up and get assessed against all of the other capital needs of the organization, and which is a big process that's ongoing. And then once that information, and that's where, and if there's more detail on that, Ms. Matthews can hopefully help with that, but that gives us a longer term view and what reserves and what types of things we have to start doing now to have the money there for facilities going forward. And then once that plan has been updated, then we will start to update the 5-year financial plan through the budget process. And then that ultimately could lead to some borrowing requirements that would go through a bylaw or a referendum or an AEP, which ultimately would lead to the investments being pursued. So everything on this diagram right now that is in green is something that where council will be involved, and everything that's in red is where the community is involved. So when Lorette went through the strategic principles, that actually represented about a half to 2/3 of the actual supporting actions that are actually identified in the real estate strategy. In the back, in the larger document, there's other supporting actions that are listed. I'm not going to take you through each one of them, but I just want to hit the highlights, and that is there are supporting actions in here that are to address resourcing, to make sure that we have the ability to move forward and implement this plan. There is several recommendations in there that are to encourage us to ensure that we do go forward with key acquisitions and dispositions, especially in the areas of infrastructure. And there are several process recommendations to allow us to process the increased work that's going to come out of this a little bit quicker or faster and smoother. And there's also some recommendations for the long term, to including contributions to reserves, looking at maybe a longer term land reserve and funds for investing in operational efficiency funds. So at the end of the day, this strategy is here to provide the districts and the community with the tools that we need to move forward and navigate this challenging path that lies ahead. Clear agreed upon principles are going to enable council, the community, and staff to move forward in the stage of analysis and decision making in a timely way. Otherwise, it could be a very scattered approach and take a long time.
I don't think you need to read everyone.
Yeah, that's fine. And it gives us a look at everything in the context of the broader organization's capital needs. It addresses where we're going to need community support, especially in places like Brennan Park, and it ensures we have the resources there to do it. So that's it.
Awesome. Lots of info to digest there. So just, we'll try to keep it to questions first so we can get everyone's, just make sure everything's clear in everyone's mind. So questions, Ted, Susan, Peter.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm glad we have Stantec helping us on this. It's one of the areas at City Hall where I think we really need help. Now you talk about, land holdings. And for example, when we ended up with the business park, we did really well with that business park. And I always thought, we should do that again. We'll get another business park going, because the one we have now is pretty much full, it's done. and we need industrial land, so, you know, there's potential up near the airport, we own some land up there. We might be able to put in a little business park. So what would Stantec say about that?
Well, it really is it's a matter of the rationale and reasons behind doing those things. If the rationale is because there's a clear business case for us to turn it into an economic development opportunity that will put cash back, then that is good and fine, but the analysis need to fully support it on a life cycle basis to say, over the time of that whole project, as we operate and maintain it, can we actually continue to make a positive return on it instead of it being a liability. The other consideration would be always the upfront cash. Of course, we all want to make great investments individually, but if you don't have the upfront cash to support making the investment, then that needs to be considered. And certainly looking at some of the financial output lying ahead, council would have to be in a very strategic decision-making frame of mind, I would say, in the next 5 years to decide the output of cash and the return on the investment, how fast you can get it back. And it might be that you can put a few million out now or can afford to do it without impacting other things too significantly. And if the return is coming back in a positive way, good. But if you're putting the cash out and it means maybe Fire Hall or Brennan Park or Municipal Hall has to suffer as a result, then of course.
Well, it's interesting because that's my point. It's hard to get to that analysis, you know, on something as substantial as that. I mean, I can go into numbers and tell you why we need more business and industrial land, but I won't get into that now, but it sounds to me like it would be a worthwhile thing. Okay, so I'll scratch that one off. And then and another one is, you know, I've got a whole list, so I'll only do one more, is selling land and buying land. Like we're looking at potentially closing a road end and giving it to a development. And, you know, we haven't assessed what the value of that land is. We haven't looked at other options for that land. And I think it says in here that we shouldn't do anything until this is complete. Is that what it says? That we shouldn't be moving forward on anything until this is complete?
That doesn't say that in the document.
Well, that's what I thought I
It
heard
says we
you say.
shouldn't be doing any acquisitions that are going to cost money until we get through the master plan process.
But sales are okay. Okay. Okay, well, I'll leave it at that, but I do have some more.
Susan, questions?
Thanks. It's really interesting to think about all these things as far as assets and liabilities, and when we're looking at different models, I worry that one of the things we're not doing is taking into account our land assets and looking at what work is completed in those assets and the possibility of changing models and doing a little bit more divergent thinking. So I'm wondering, when you did these things, did you talk about splitting assets and what they were worth and value? As far as, you know, we look at Municipal Hall as a plate, you know, currently as this grand building that, well, it's definitely not a grand building as it is, but the possibility, we need a new Municipal Hall for sure. But what Municipal Hall is a bunch of desks in a place, in a room like this where we gather to make decisions.
It's an office environment.
It's an office
And a
environment.
Public space.
Exactly. So looking at things as what their use is and where they could be shared or looked into. So we're still looking at things in a very in-the-box municipal way, and we really do have to move towards divergent thinking in terms of our assets and where we can combine facilities. I don't see a lot of that in this plan. I'm wondering how much that was looked at as far as combining facilities, sharing facilities, looking for outside partnerships. I know you mentioned, I'm certainly happy to hear that with third-party partnerships and other models like that. That's a lot of money, and looking at it, but it doesn't all have to be spent, and a lot of it can be shared across resources. So,
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So we haven't got to any of that yet. That's coming in the master plan process. I mean, as part of this exercise, we did start to go down some of those paths to figure out what they may look like and to see how they could incite development of the strategy. But at the end of the day, we got to a point where like we can't get into those types of decisions without community engagement and doing more research and analysis, which is why we recommend that next due diligence phase. But I think that what we're trying to do here right now is bring it back to a principal level, so when we leave here and go to work on the master plan, staff is going off on a path knowing that council is endorsing a certain direction, and we're gonna uncover and look at all of that. But in here, it does say we need to maximize our facilities as a principal statement, which is why at Benham Park, we will look at, can we bring other elements in there? Can we even bring some of the nonprofits that are sitting in maybe in a building that is costing a lot of money to manage, bring that into Brenham Park and shared space. So the principal level is there, just not the specifics right now.
So I guess, I think where Councilor Schmelz is going is that needs to make sure that that's really featured within this policy and not just get down the road of this is 2,000 square feet and it costs this and this is, so just, and I think that's why, as you articulated, you kind of stopped there and said there's a whole bunch of layers of thinking that need to go on to this and evaluation, so give sort of an understanding of what the cost may be and what the needs are, but how they all fit together and tag team. So how do we make sure that's front and center within the, and you want to build on that?
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? I totally agree with those points, and we, so basically when you're laying it out and on the page that says this property is going to be rebuilt, this property is going to be, there you go. Maybe just set me up that one. For the expanded upgrade, I think that list, just before we even get there, you have to understand what can be cohabitated, what can be basically, what can be co-located. But when you put it up there and say expand, upgrade, or replace, you're already setting context for the community. You're not allowing people to envision the context that could be created by having a little bit more creativity in the thinking process and the financial modeling.
So how do we just make sure that's in the document, that we're not predetermining something? We're basically saying these need to be replaced, but how they get replaced, where they get replaced, where the synergy is still,
Because they
we
can all
just
be
need to make sure
replaced.
that that's clear, because I think that's the intent of the document.
It is.
But
We will revisit the language, you know, and at this stage in the game, the reason why we did this was we just wanted to see, we have existing facilities, they look like they need to be replaced. If we were to replace them, we wanted to get just a rough idea what the order of magnitude is we're dealing with here. We realize it's a pretty big order of magnitude, and for us to bridge that gap or to reduce that gap between what this suggests and what we have in the bank and what we may want to go to the taxpayer for, there's a lot of work that has to be done. And we have to, and every square foot counts, every dollar counts going forward, excuse me.
And those numbers are not written in stone,
No,
in terms of
these
costs,
are-
they're just to give
Yeah, I
ballpark,
wouldn't even
right?
put numbers there. I would just basically remove the numbers, put the facilities that are in need, and they're all existing facilities, but to say expand, replace, or new facilities is just, you take out all possibility of economic modeling, of partnerships, and you preconceive a notion without looking outside the box and actually thinking about different models.
So that's not the intention, so we'll make sure the language is just really clear on that. Thanks. Peter?
Yeah, and further to that, excuse me, looking at the timeline here, and we're talking number 4, which is our community feedback piece in the Benham Park expansion, and you said that was imminent. Do you have a date for that piece?
Robin?
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. Robin Arthurs, General Manager, Corporate Services. We've just closed the RFP for the consultation piece on the engagement, and the review team have gone through and are in the process of selecting the final successful proponent, and probably end of next week, I'm thinking. Yeah, at the latest. We'll have that award, and then we'll be meeting with them and kicking it off and going forward. The timelines that were established were set in stone, so we have to meet them and they have to meet them. So we expect the whole thing to be finished by the end of July.
So sometime possibly August or
The first kickoff, I think, is actually in May.
Finished in July, so that the engagement pieces will be May and June,
Oh, perfect, thank you.
before people head off on.
I'll come back to you, Ted.
That was my
Ted, you have more?
Yeah.
Question, we're still on questions. We're
Yeah.
trying to get some,
Yeah,
make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
well, Brennan Park, the idea of having a city hall there, I know, I'd love to see that in a question.
Okay,
But,
we're,
so the question is, do we have a fact sheet, or when we're buying and selling, is there a process that we follow with standard questions on each acquisition or sale to protect us? To make sure that we're looking at all aspects of the land, future and present.
I think that's the intent of this document. I guess the question is it articulating it clearly now?
So through you, Mary, in the document, Stantec has sort of laid out some processes that we would follow, with, almost like an algorithm, I would say, to, if we're thinking of selling a piece of property, these are the questions we need to ask to see at the end of the day if it spits out the bottom. I think on one of these tables, you can't read this, it was just there for illustrative purposes, but this is an example of one of the tables that we have for what we would go through if we're thinking of selling a property. And it asks us whether we need to,
I
have
suppose
uses
you
for
could tell
it.
us what page that is on.
I think I can take you there in the document. Let's just see.
And
Well, this is
within
gonna be-
those algorithms, there's questions like, are there synergies with other facilities? Are there timing issues? We have those questions within those algorithms?
Well, in this algorithm here, for example, this is the acquisition one, but
There's a page on the bottom there.
it's 68 on the report. Sorry, in page 68 of the strategy document, which is attached to your report.
Six-
78 to 220.
Thank you.
So when it comes to acquisitions of land, Lorette went through and sort of showed you at the high level what the key criteria was. In this one here, it's saying, like, first thing up is if we have a land need and we can put it on district-sponsored Crown Grant land, the land that we already own, and it can only be used for municipal purposes, that's the lowest cost to the taxpayer. So if we have that land, yes, we put it on there. If it can't be fit on there, then we would put it, if we can put it on Crown land, because typically we can acquire Crown land at a lower cost than we can private land, we would put it on Crown land, especially if we can get it on Crown land that we can get through a sponsored Crown grant. If it's going to cost us money, then we may want to look at acquiring a land through the rezoning process. So it kicks us over here to the rezoning process, which is another way of getting land without having to actually cut checks and pay for it. And if we can get it through rezoning or subdivision, then yes, we would get that at that stage through the dedication process. If not, then we may look at, is there other ways we can get the land? Can we do a swap? Can we do a land lease? And ideally with the province, the better. The whole idea here is to try and drive this to a place where at the last case is when we're actually buying private land, okay? And so that's,
Yeah. So that's kind of a list of rules, but I didn't hear anything about, hey, a piece of property came up for sale down the street. Do we want to buy that land? Like the question, we haven't got to the question. So the study will be done and we'll have all these rules and an opportunity may pop up.
So I think Neil has the answer
Come to
for
the
you.
table.
You asked the question.
so where we're going right now is if we have a need, if it meets a need, obviously we're going to require it. If we don't have a need for that property, then we have to start evaluating against why are we making that acquisition. And is that acquisition, as Lorette explained earlier, going to compete with money that we need to consider for a more immediate need? So this process doesn't rule that out. We're never going to not look at those things. But what we're trying to get to right now is some principles and some concepts as we move forward so that we can start to evaluate those things against our priorities.
Yeah, well,
So the answer is, it doesn't necessarily, the answer is no to Ted's question. We're not going out and looking at every piece of land that's for sale out there and evaluating it for needs.
that's right.
we're not doing
Not right now, good.
that. So the answer is no, this policy
Yeah,
does
that's
not.
right.
direct that.
I'm just making that point because, you know, I mean, we all know that the real estate doubled in value in the last 10 years and there was opportunities for affordable housing, for parking lots, for all these things that we missed. So I just wanted to bring up that
So
point.
if there was, for example, if we, one of the things the policy says is our strategy is not to purchase land for affordable housing, but it is to acquire land through Cram Grant or other development applications, whatever, to get it. So that's the strategy. It says don't purchase for, but it does contemplate purchasing for civic needs. So that's in there, correct?
Correct. And what I will say is that what's not shown up here yet is what's been done at our departmental level to get to this analysis is we went through all of the land needs that we identified. We went and we looked at each need to figure out where we could actually potentially acquire the land for that, whether it was on our, we ran it through this process. And we even looked at all of our existing properties and what strategic acquisitions might be neighboring them or near them that might help in the future. So we have done all that. It hasn't. That's going to come through at the master plan stage. It wasn't complete enough to at this point, but it will be in the master. So we already have turned our mind to that. But what we're trying to say here is that we need to start prioritizing and getting focused on our critical needs.
Okay, we're way over time, so I've got Susan and Karen.
Thanks, and I just want to expand on what Ted said, that I agree, things like City Hall and the school, I didn't see the school board partnership anywhere in there. They have a huge amount of land assets and they should be considered, I know it can't be considered in our municipal thing, but the partnership needs to be mentioned as well when they
It is.
well, it says build on partnerships, but it's really, when you look at land assets, we have two massive schools in our downtown.
Can I ask Neil just to respond, saying how comprehensively are potential collaborations articulated in the document?
It talks about P2 partnerships in several spots, and we didn't name
Public-private,
individuals.
not
Public to public is in
Public,
there.
P2,
Yeah, we
public,
are-
private is public, P3.
Yeah, we are going to look at everything we can possibly do to
Yeah.
save money here because we have a big gap to fill. So we will look at all that, and that's all going to come through at the master plan stage.
I don't want to go to the public with the Brennan Park that is just being expanded on without the option to renew a different economic, I think it's ridiculous without full economic modeling to really understand what a full renewal of Brennan Park looks like with different strategies. So I want to make sure that when we go to the public, it's placed in the public eye, not just as we're going to do this little renewal on the side, but we're going to actually go forward with, here's our option for this, here's our option for this. And let the public decide. I think it's a public building, it needs public decision. I think that going forward with a partnership just for expansion, we are going to a public process.
I know we are, but it's outside of this topic specifically.
It's got it right in here,
Yes,
as an expansion, not a renewal.
okay.
And that needs to be opened up for economic modeling. And I find that we tend to go forward without economic modeling to ask questions where we don't have numbers to put in place. We have the numbers for an expansion, we don't have options for a complete renewal with public-private, with a P3 renewal, with changing our Crown Grant, with changing other things. There's all sorts of options that we haven't explored.
Okay, so through Mayor, understood. Again, there's a lot of information here, and how it all plays out in the document isn't always clear. But one of the things we've identified here is, back to this stage, is it was a little bit closer. We are at this stage in the game here under options analysis. Before we come back to council and before we go to the community, we are going to start looking at business cases when we come to council. We want to be able to, ideally, we haven't done this yet, so we'll see how it plays out, but our goal is to come in here at the council workshop stage and say, we've started to look at different options of how we can do this. And here's some business case analysis on some of these things before we go to the community. Because if we go to the community and say, hey, would you like this, would you like that, and there's no economic reality to it, then we're getting into problems. So
Thank you, Neil.
there's a life cycle analysis in terms of how to do business casing, and we're open to that. So
Yeah. Karen and Jason, and I'm going to try to wrap this up.
Just when you had the algorithm for whether we acquire land, I wonder if the first question is, can it be located on our current land or co-located with a district, a current building or a building that's planned? So just make the question broader, and I think that would address everybody's concerns that we're considering that element. And also, my other question is just under section E around organizational capacity. We talk about streamlining the acquisition and disposition process, but we know that we have like 79 leases, and that takes up a lot of time. So I also wondered why we wouldn't add in there, like, is there a way that we can just streamline that work so that staff can be focused on the more strategic elements?
So if you remember, we are going to explore the delegation bylaw. A lot of our leasing activity now does come through the delegation bylaw to the C.A.O's office. We have a threshold of a 5-year lease term and a $10,000 a year limit. And so we're going to look at that and see if there's ways we can tweak that without taking the strategic decision-making away from council, but giving the C.A.O's office and staff the ability to process more. Because even right now, if we have an amendment to a lease that the value is $10,000, even though it's a minor amendment, because the lease is $10,000, we have to bring it to the council. So we're going to look at a variety of those things as part of that.
Excellent. Jason?
Yes, I really like the way the plan is going and how it's done the prioritization of land acquisition and disposition. Question that I had was around how do we in the modeling account for growth? Because I could understand, I mean, my interpretation of the way we talked that on that slide about fiscal capacity was a 1% increase in taxation to support borrowing over, you know, blah, 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 blah year. I'm assuming that that is just assuming no growth in the community in terms of tax rate, or sorry, assessment values and community size. Is that, did I interpret that correctly?
Are you on this one?
Yeah, that one.
Right. So what, bear with me, I'll get to this one. So yeah, I mean, this plus or minus $4 million a year in borrowing capacity, that's based on our current tax roll budget scenario. As the community grows, that will potentially increase, right? So the ability to borrow more money is there. And that also, that 1% tax increase is based on the current tax rolls. So those numbers might soften a bit, I think, so that, which can help as we go through time. What may end up happening though is you may end up finding the facilities we're constructing and the costs of inflation go up as well. That may or may not offset that as time goes on, but, excuse me. But yeah, that's based on the current scenario.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess my concern is that, you know, I definitely understand the impetus to, you know, be conservative. We don't want to overbuild by any means, but also need to recognize the long lead time that it takes to plan major projects. And I don't want us to get behind the 8 ball when, you know, all the projections that we see show our population doubling within the time span of the 20 years, right? So clearly, I mean, all else being equal, one would assume double the capacity, right? And so obviously it's not that simple, but if there's in a next iteration sort of a way to further refine that financially to become a little bit more comfortable so that we're not just thinking, you know, dealing with today's resources, because I think we're fairly unique in terms of a community. I mean, a lot of other communities, you know, they grow at 1% a year, and it's, you know, they have a lot of existing facilities, but we're going to hit some of those key thresholds, which I really do believe we've obviously had with Brennan Park in particular. So anything we can do just so that people sort of can understand that full thing. And again, as was mentioned just a moment ago, I mean, construction costs, material costs, building costs, they never get cheaper. So, you know, we might save some money at the front end if we're planning accordingly, and then not having to maybe rush. So that was my only sort of concern about the program, is just to make sure that we're thinking as a higher growth community.
Yeah, Neil?
Quickly, yeah, thanks. In terms of these facilities, several of the facilities, I mean, to get to these numbers, these replacement numbers, we did look at future growth in most of our facilities. We've got some space planning done on several to project out what we think we may need for the next 25 years. So there is growth projections in the square footages of those, and that'll
right. And so my point is that, yeah, so that's in the expenditure side, but we don't talk about the growth and the potential fiscal capacity, so it seems a lot more scarier than perhaps maybe it has to be. That's my only point, and it's just me making a point, it's not really a question.
And one of the challenges of this has always been, doing a snapshot of today and dealing with where we are today and developing a strategy that we can use and implement over a 20-year period. I think what we've learned at staff level from this is, without a doubt, there's going to be some give and take in different places, but the reality right now is there's a pretty big gap we need to think about how we're going to address, and we have to get creative as to how we're going to do that. So this is giving us some principles to work from.
That was ready to tie this in a bow. Go ahead.
So I'll be quick, because on that point, I tend to agree with Councillor Blackman-Wolf. I'm not personally too fussed about the numbers. Obviously, we can't spend money we don't have. I'm more looking at this plan to sort of establish priorities and principles and how we deal with situations as they arise. But I mean, there's potential grant funding, which goes up and down depending on the number of senior government elections there are in the next 10 or 20 years, as one example. And there's also the potential for a significant heavy industry taxation, which at numbers kicked around could fund this whole thing without borrowing in 15 to 20 years. So that doesn't bother me. I think I just focus on the building part of it and what we need to have in our minds going forward and selecting priorities and so forth.
I don't think we should get bogged down in the costs, and I would comfortably take them out, although it's okay to have some sort of value in there. But for me, generally I think the document's pretty good. This has always been sort of a missing piece to our strategic thinking. We've dialed in all the other master plans pretty well, but then we get to our 10-year financial plans, and we hadn't modeled this stuff yet, and so there was always this big gap, and this fills a huge gap. It's not perfect, and it's organic. It's going to be ground truthed as we move along, and we go through specific planning processes, whether it's around Brandon Park or around a municipal civic facility downtown, or whatever it may look like in the future. This gives us a pretty good building blocks to be able to do that. And so I'm really glad that it's in front of us. I guess, and with some of these master, they're so valuable because they set us up for grant funding and opportunities like that. We're nimble, we've got our strategic planning in place so that when those opportunities come up, we can react quickly, and we have to be ready to take advantage of those things. I guess some of the challenge is we tend to almost think they're gospel as soon as we adopt it. We got into a little bit of that with the integrated flood hazard management plan last week in terms of, I thought we were doing sheet pile here, no, council's so they're guidance documents, they help us plan, particularly financially, but they're not written in stone documents. They're definitely things, I think this is alluding to a little bit what Susan was saying about, we want to make sure that we're not shutting the door down to conversation or opportunities, partnership opportunities, collaborative opportunities. So I think this sets out the parameter whereby it's open enough. I think some things could be a little more clear, like really right up front in the strategic goal is maximizing facilities right up there, strategic collaborations first and foremost. Might be a little bit of sequencing but generally I think it's a supportable document. And so I would like council to consider, I think we can adopt it today, but the recommendation from the committee would be that council consider adopting the real estate facility strategy. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Blackman-Wolf. I think we've had a good kick at this can. Any C.A.O. you okay to? Okay, I'll call first. Okay,
Just
go ahead.
comment on it. No, I appreciate all the work that was done by both the consultant and our staff. It seems like a very simplistic plan, and it really, with the A, B, C, and not a lot of room for, I don't see a lot of room in there for actually being innovative or having different thinking. I know that it's just a plan to lay on the table so that we have an idea about the amount of investment that is required, and to set the community up for an idea that this is where we have to go, this is what we have to fund. But I wish that we had looked a little bit more at modeling some of the areas, and I know that
We're
will
gonna
be
get to that
happening.
stage, yeah.
And I know, boy, you guys love jumping in before I finish.
Well, we're just way behind, like an hour, so.
I know, yes, but, you know, I know that it's, never mind, carry on.
Oh, that modeling's gonna come, but just on Councillor Chappelle's point, I'm just trying to scroll back up, it's my large document. In almost the introductory part of it, really highlighting collaborations and partnership opportunities, maybe more than they are. Is that possible?
Yeah.
And
Huge land assets in our downtown.
just to make sure that that's really right up front.
Okay.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Why don't we take a 3-minute break and we'll come back to Swamp Cities. We are back in our committee of the whole meeting, and we are on item 4.2, Smart Cities considerations and recommendations. Kate.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Kate Mulligan, Economic Development Officer for the District of Squamish, and I'm here to provide you with an update on Smart Squamish and make a recommendation that the committee recommend that Council approve the following resolution. That Council authorize the submission of an application by District of Squamish to Infrastructure Canada's Smart Cities Challenge for the $10 million prize category focused on developing a regenerative community. I'm just going to take you quickly through the process in terms of our Smart Cities exploration. Council had authorized economic development or staff to look at the potential for an application and to undertake community engagement. And as part of the process, we began with a partner request for information. And the idea was to look for potential partners that could support our application with solutions, smart city solutions. And we had 15 proposals submitted, and there's actually more than 15 partners that you see on the screen, because some partners submitted with their own partners. We had 13 that advanced for public engagement, and of the 13, 10 were profiled as part of our Squamish Symposium. There's a variety of themes, everything from clean energy, resilient energy, to air quality, to waste management that partners put forward in context with our OCP and with our goals as a community. We also looked at the official community plan. We did a review of that. We looked in particular at community issues, drivers, and goals, which include rapid growth, housing affordability and supply, economy and local jobs, local and regional transportation, environmental protection, and community health and well-being. And we looked at that in the context of the challenge and what goals or community issues could be driven potentially through innovation, data, and technology. As I mentioned, with the partner process, we actually did a significant community consultation in a short period of time. That included pushing live on February 23rd a Smart Cities site for the general public, and that allowed them to understand what the challenge was about, find out a little bit more about how Squamish was going to undertake the process. We also showcased all the proposals for online feedback, and there was 13 profiled on the site. It's still live. We also did challenge pop-ups, pop-up quizzes asking the public what area they'd like to focus on for the challenge. And then we held our Smart Cities or Smart Squamish Symposium on March 12th. And at the symposium, there was 63 public and 25 partners plus staff. And we had basically short, brief presentations on all of the ideas. There was a chance for the public to interact with the various partners, and we also undertook some group discussions around the potential themes. And all of those videos from the symposium are posted live on the respective partner proposal pages.
Well, not live, but
recorded.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then we, as part of the online engagement, just wanted to point out that so far we've had 849 page views to date since launch, and 382 page views on the general Smart Cities landing page. The pop-up quiz, we had 78 respondents, and healthy environment was the area of focus noted most by the public, followed by healthy living and recreation, and then economic opportunity. We asked a number of questions during the symposium and also online for the public's feedback, in particular around the potential themes for the challenge, as well as what stood out as positive or areas they'd like to change or areas of concern with the actual proposals that were presented by potential partners. Taking the online engagement feedback and then taking also the symposium, so the online and offline, and putting it all together, these were the key themes that came out. Jobs and productivity, clean environment, geographical mobility, social mobility, and so on. And so that was a real consideration for us moving into the thematic approach that we would recommend for consideration by council. And one thing we knew up front, and I think one of the things that economic development was trying to address was the fact that we had a short timeline to cover a lot of bases in terms of ideation around Smart Cities Challenge and gathering enough community feedback, and also developing a meaningful theme. So at the same time as we were recruiting partners that could potentially help us, we were also needing to define what is our problem and our challenge. We asked partners to help us with that, and we asked them to do that by looking at our OCP and the drivers and issues and our goals, and trying to look at potential solutions that could address that. And then we also did a lot of our own secondary research and took all the feedback into consideration. So we arrive at 3 themes, and the themes are a basis for which to form a challenge statement. So at this point, we aren't recommending a specific challenge statement. What we're recommending is a particular theme to focus on, so that staff and partners can work together to be able to recommend to council a more detailed challenge statement for their consideration. So the first theme is called adaptive mobility. And the idea is to make how people and goods move more efficient while reducing our impact on the environment. So this theme explores how Squamish can make moving easier, more efficient, cleaner, while adapting to and embracing changing technology. The uniqueness in this proposal is that while Squamish faces similar mobility challenges to that of larger and more urban centers, it's not equipped with similar infrastructure, population density, or capital required to make large investments in mobility. As such, this theme aims to address our mobility needs for today and into the future in consideration of the complexity that we face as a community. And why? Because making how we move is a priority for mitigating challenge statement change. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, human-driven releases of greenhouse gas emissions are likely to be the dominant cause of global warming, and globally 80% come from burning fossil fuels and other industrial processes. In 2015, 26% of GHG emissions came from the oil and gas sector, 24% from transportation. And Canada aims to reduce these GHG emissions to 30% below its 2005 levels by 2030. So if we're going to realize that target, communities across Canada need to embrace clean and more efficient transportation options. And beyond the ecological footprint, addressing the efficiency of how we move people and goods has positive economic and social impacts. According to research conducted by C.A.O in 2017, positive impacts to economic and social resiliency are realized when it becomes easier for a worker to move locally and in between regions. In research conducted by Stanley Banks, they found that rural areas are at a higher risk of social exclusion than that of urban centers, meaning mobility needs to be a key priority for rural areas. Another big thing is that it's the second largest expenditure after housing for Canadians. It's actually the #1 expenditure for people living in the UK, which I was like, oh, okay, #1, sure.
Gas is way more expensive.
Yeah, but as number 2, I think that's a real incentive for us to look at our mobility and how we shift to clean and efficient transportation. So Squamish is focused on addressing our mobility needs today, but we need to at the same time prepare for tomorrow. Advancements in mobility are moving at a rapid pace, and our community and like communities will benefit from a strategic approach to adaptation. Additionally, our smaller scale comes with similar challenges to that of larger urban cores, and it requires a different approach to problem solving and adaptability. So imagine a local adaptive mobility in action, and we're already doing some of this. So supporting economic development for employees and employers, making us more inclusive, accessible, tackling climate change and preserving our natural capital, helping us better manage and adapt to growth, making us more resilient and adaptable as a community, and being a role model for other communities. Some sample solutions, and I call these sample solutions at this point. We're working to flesh out all the solutions with particular partners. But some ideas are clean, low emission, or electrified public transportation. So adapting our public transportation fleet, using data and technology to help us move more efficiently by employing sensor technology for more efficient mobility routing, building and installing smart mobility infrastructure, government procurement and policy encouraging optimized
We don't
clean
need
and
to read
efficient,
all.
and so on and so forth.
And you can highlight some of them, but I just don't want to get into reading.
Yeah, absolutely. So in conclusion, the adaptive mobility is not so much just about mobility itself for our local citizens. It's about adapting to the change that we're going to be facing over the coming years, and how are we going to get ourselves into a position where we're more risk averse as we adapt. So that's the concept. So that's the first theme. The second theme is called resilient and prepared. And the idea of this theme is that we improve our capacity and efficiency to mitigate, prepare, and respond to emergencies and disasters. So driven largely by climate change, weather events around the world are happening with increasing frequency and severity. Communities throughout Canada and around the world are suffering significant human and economic loss, and they're grappling with how to improve their resiliency while mitigating environmental impacts. So this theme, it explores how Squamish can become more resilient and prepared as it faces the impacts of climate change and the increasing risk of natural disasters. So Squamish's vulnerabilities to floods, fires, and other natural disasters really makes it a model environment for new innovative technology deployments and data solutions that mitigate risk associated with disasters. Our geographical landscape is one that lends itself well to demonstration, not only due to its high-risk nature, but also the complexity in dealing with large-scale disasters in a small community with significant population flows due to tourism, and the potential isolation it faces should disaster occur. A little bit more about why. The Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change found that weather-related disasters are becoming increasingly common. There was an average of 306 events attributed to extreme weather occurring every year between 2007 and 2016, and that's a 46% rise since 2000. Mainly storms and floods, these disasters are causing catastrophic levels of economic damage around the world. 10 years ago, there were 606 extreme weather losses with a bill of $69 billion. Last year, there were 797 with a bill of $129.4 billion. And the Insurance Bureau of Canada found that in 2016, severe weather and natural disasters caused a record year for insurable damage in Canada. And in addition, Statistics Canada recognized that more than 12.4 million Canadians aged 15 years and older have personally experienced a major emergency or disaster within their community within their lifetime. And nearly 3 in 4 indicated that the emergency was significant enough to have severely disrupted their regular daily routine. Going to skip past this one. So imagine our resiliency in action. Our community's early warning systems prevent human and economic loss. We have resilient and clean power feeding our grid when disaster strikes. Our emergency response units can get where they need to efficiently, and we're mitigating the risk of disasters through monitoring, data insights, and resilient technology. So here are a few sample solutions, everything from sensor technology to smart infrastructure to routing and data to help us make better decisions, as well as mitigation technology so that we know there's a risk that's coming, so, and how to deal with that. So there's a lot of different opportunities around solutions, and our partners brought to the table quite a few through their proposals, but they also have additional capacity that weren't even mentioned within proposals. The final theme is called a regenerative community. And this theme is about reducing our collective footprint while expanding our economy. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation defines a circular economy as one that looks beyond the current take, make, and dispose model. It's restorative, it's regenerative by design. It relies on system-wide innovation. It aims to redefine products and services to design out waste, and while minimizing negative impacts. And it's underpinned by a transition to renewable energy sources. It builds economic, natural, and social capital. So this theme explores how Squamish can become a regenerative and restorative economy and design by employing circular economy principles. It aims to address the way we make and use our products to reduce our impact on the environment while producing positive incentives such as added productivity and profitability and encouraging new local firms and employment. So why? Well, there's a number of different reasons, social, economic, environmental. The majority of the world's population are living in cities, and they account for 85% of global GDP. And they also account for 75% of the world's consumption of natural resources. We also have to look at the fact that 50% of the world's waste production is by cities. So we also have this challenge where we're facing increasing climate change, and our natural resources, our raw materials are not infinite. So how do we actually change the model from a linear one to a circular one? We're doing this in many different ways. We're already doing this locally to an extent. And businesses are doing this because it makes sense to their bottom line, and it also makes sense for the environment. We haven't seen as many examples of this at a city level. Scotland is one example where they have actually created a circular economy strategy, and that strategy is underpinned by moving to diverting waste, focusing on food production, focusing on renewable energy sources, and looking at, as a government, how it procures and uses its goods and services. So the idea in this one is really maximizing the value of what we make and use, and ensuring that we're not providing a negative impact through our consumption. And at the same time, perhaps reducing our consumption patterns. How do we do this? So imagine a regenerative community. So the idea would be that we're mitigating risk to business because we're actually incorporating new business models, new productivity models that actually have a profit center attached to them. And we're retaining that value in our economy. So instead of disposing of our byproducts and treating it as waste, we're actually remanufacturing. We have a reverse logistics stream that's actually bringing those byproducts back into the manufacturing process. We're creating jobs and growth because with new innovation comes new products and services, and becomes new opportunities for jobs. We're also tackling climate change and preserving our natural capital by looking at the energy that it takes to make and use our goods and redefining that. And then we're building on our advantages. We have an excellent brand in terms of our natural assets, and we have to protect that brand. And I think that this is one key way to work towards that. So some ideas would be to create a circular economy marketplace. That would be sharing production byproducts, wood waste, brewery byproducts, electronic components, clothing with other local companies or people. We're already doing that with many examples, everything from Rebuild in Squamish to Facebook posts, but we don't actually have a business platform that would support that. Build on our carbon marketplace, creating remanufacturing knowledge and innovation hub as a center of expertise We would create an institute to help the remanufacturing industry grow and innovate, undertake collaborative projects between industry, government, and higher education, and develop a remanufacturing community involved in business and academics. Procure intelligent assets. So to understand and quantify opportunity and enable incentive schemes for businesses and individuals to become more resource productive. So for example, reduce waste or improve waste disposal behavior, reduce energy and water resource demand. Demonstrate through action, so lead with our government policy procurement practices that support extending life cycles of products, using products as a service, using public procurement guidelines to encourage circular business models, and as well support innovation. Incent circular supply chains, so engage and include local residents and businesses, provide education and training and innovative tools backed with technology and data, and create opportunity loss for action. So let's incent this behavior with financial incentives. Investment-centric for circular economy businesses. So let's promote Squamish as a circular economy to attract businesses with with the same model in terms of how they go about their business. Create programs, so support education, collaboration, innovation, and the interplay between circular economy and intelligent assets. Use data and foster technology. So encourage and integrate technologies that support circular economy value chains, carbon capture, waste diversion, asset tagging, geospatial information, big data management, and so on. So those are just some ideas. The consideration, do you want me to stop here, or did you want to discuss, or do you want me to keep going?
Why don't we, any questions about the 3 themes? And there's obviously lots of interplay within the themes as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, they're not
mutually exclusive.
linear, yeah.
No.
Any questions? Everyone gets the big themes? Yeah, Ted?
Well, just, so we're applying for this grant.
Well, council will determine that, yeah.
Yeah. And are we going for one of these 3?
Yeah, that would be the idea.
So the report suggests one of the themes
Yeah.
as the top, but they're all potential, and staff will rationalize through the engagement and whatever why they've suggested one over the others, but they're all open theoretically to council's discretion. So maybe we'll continue.
Okay.
Sorry, was that a hand? No. Okay.
So this is just a sample challenge statement for the regenerative economy. There's only placeholders for the targets at this point, but we would work towards that target. This is just an example.
So just to go over this again, within the Smart Cities Challenge,
Yeah.
this is the foundational premise of the application.
Absolutely. So what we've been asked to do as part of the application is develop a 50-word or less challenge statement, and then expand on that challenge statement with more information about what it means, and then also all the supporting evidence, like how would you go about, what would your proposal look like for solving this, and who are your partners, and so on and so forth. But the challenge statement itself is the primary. I think it's the most important to get right. It's the problem definition, and
everything else.
It all evolves from there. Exactly. So the idea here is just to give you an example of what a restorative and regenerative challenge statement could look like. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
We'll go to Susan and Peter.
Thanks.
On this, I mean, this is just a suggestion.
This is just a suggestion at this point. Like this is.
Will we have enough data to actually
inform it?
Yeah, do we actually, I'm just wondering about, this is sort of a pre-application for the 250, right? So it's not so essential to get the perfect data in there, but will we have enough, like for instance, greenhouse gas emissions? Yes, we have, we could say that we commute X amount, so we have this much greenhouse gas emissions, so there you go.
I was like, thank you for leading me into that.
Please.
Thank you for leading me into that.
Yeah.
So what I've done here.
So just 2 seconds.
Oh yeah.
So we'll get to that.
Okay.
Peter, do you have a clarification question?
Yeah, just so that the 50 words there is sort of just preamble to put the hook in, and screenwriting, they call it a log line, so if you want it to be exciting and get them in. But the following piece then to that, how deep does that need to go? To what extent does that need to go?
We'll get into that, won't we?
Yeah, we will.
Leading up to
Yeah,
it.
we're
Let's
leading up
keep
to
going.
it. Yeah,
Okay, thank
okay.
you.
So what I did for the purpose of just demonstrating how these targets would come into play, I took the OCP, I went through the OCP and there's a bunch of objectives with targets in there and baselines. And I pulled out where we have baselines and where we have current targets that would feed this. The one area where we would need to establish a baseline, we have the baseline, sorry, is a target that's not in the OCP, is around our employment growth. And also I would recommend the number of commuters. And in terms of assigning a target for the challenge, I think it's really important for both staff to contextualize how we're actually going to achieve these targets as they stand today, and then what a $10 million incremental value would mean in terms of what the targets could be in conjunction with the partners, and then making a recommendation back to council. We, however, have to have this application in by April 24th, so it's a quick timeline.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, helpful, Susan?
And the only one I'm wondering about is we could do a global measurement of our GHG by zoning. Would it be bolder to be able to say, if we're looking at new buildings by 5 years, to have a more global GHG reduction? I think most people, I don't think it differentiates us, but if we had reduced citywide GHG emissions through reduction, like these other ones are fantastic, and even just increasing the amount of local employment reduces GHGs. You can also measure by type of building the amount of GHGs that's measured in footprint, which we have the data for.
It's always been something we haven't really put our minds to, is the community, overall community.
It's super easy programs now to do that.
So
based on zoning.
Yeah.
what I can say to this is we can take that back at the staff level and discuss what that would look like.
Exactly. It's a curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, it's not within my expertise to comment on that. But what I would say is that when we apply, we do have a bit of room to work on our measurement, I think, with that $250,000, and that would be a key place about establishing not only the top line measurement, but what are all those other measures that we want to focus on for that final application, which would happen if we became finalist.
Yeah. It could be to fund the program cash. So
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next one, I just wanted to stress that out of all the webinars and the discussions that I've had in person with Infrastructure Canada, I think these are really important and also partners who many of them are working with other municipalities as well around smart cities. I think clear strategy and policy framework, regulatory framework is really key in being database and achievable for the actual application. Community impact, it's key. If we're just moving the needle from great to even better, it's not a real impact, and they really want to see a problem and a solution that drives a positive outcome, so that's super important. And then they did stress quite a bit that partnerships are really, really important. They mentioned that, seeing regions working together, First Nations communities working together in partnership, definitely was important to Infrastructure Canada. So that's just some considerations. This is, and I know this is an eye chart, I apologize, but these are basically the different...
I would just like to say all three presentations today have complained or prefaced a busy slide with that comment, just so you know.
This is my eye chart on this one. So basically, challenge statement and described outcomes. So that's the challenge statement we were just talking about, and then an expanded challenge statement of about 2,500 words. That's 40 out of 100. And then the actual proposal is actually not that significant. So we just need to have a fairly high-level proposal with our partners around what those solutions would be. And the one thing Infrastructure Canada mentioned was that they're happy to course correct along the way. They don't anticipate, this is about innovation. This isn't about in the can solutions. It's about actually striving towards a goal that perhaps you don't quite know what the answers are. And that's okay. Engagement and alignment to our goals, and then the plan for our $250,000 grant. It's not about how we'd spend the $10 million, although we need to ground truth that amount in our application. It's about how we would spend the $250,000. I've looked at the regenerative community from many different angles. It's contained within the report. I feel like it is impactful, measurable, ambitious, achievable, and unique. And I've also, in a very high level way, kind of tried to ground truth a bit what it could look like. So these are just some sample solutions with some budgets attached, which include not only sort of the infrastructure capital investment, but also the management of the program over a 5-year period.
And when you say something like waste diversion, that's everything. That's wood waste, that's
Absolutely.
That's, solid waste, that's
Absolutely. Residential, commercial, that's, yeah, exactly. That's using
air
business
quality, that's
byproducts.
particulates in the air,
Absolutely.
that's however we want to, okay.
And that also with, in further discussions with the partners, they're waiting for the outcome of today. We'd be looking at, okay, what are those really important solutions that we need to drive to be able to meet these goals? And what do they have in terms of capacity and expertise? These are the invited and confirmed initial partners. So, of course, contingent on approval. All of these partners have said yes. And we received notification that they're making themselves available for the final stage of the application development. I have done a competitor scan, and that competitor scan yielded about 14 applying in the $10 million category range. Now, I don't know if that's everybody or every community, but that's what I was able to find based on a review. Most of the ones that I've found have been focused on food resiliency or social resiliency, such as poverty reduction. And then there were several that were focused on mobility, lots focused on mobility, as well as I did see a few that were very technology based in the sense that it was about, Wi-Fi and fiber, very solution oriented, but I'm not quite sure what problem it was addressing because I just only have the information from the other communities based on news reports and so on and so forth. And then I did see one other one that did reference the circular economy. So that's what I've seen so far in the ecosystem of applications. So that's sort of my scan. In terms of next steps, it would be just to confirm lead and supporting partners, communicate to the public, develop an application, submit, and then if we're successful, get that $250,000 grant. There is 10 finalists in the $10 million category. So if we have, I would say I found 14, let's say there's 18 or 20, our odds are not bad in terms of
So far, I mean, there might
becoming a
some
finalist.
last one.
That's, yeah, I'm not sure, so. And that is the end of the presentation.
Awesome. With Susan and then Karen.
Thanks. So the one thing I didn't see, and I thought about this a lot after watching, I came to the presentations and looked at all the presenters, and then I looked at our strategies over the last few years, and I thought about a lot of the things that we have come forward, but because of funding or resources, have not been able to afford to do. And the one thing that I thought about in that way was the IPP project where we were going to be resilient and have an influx of power that we could have our own power source for, but it was unaffordable to us. And it would have made us resilient and I dropped off the table, and after we voted it down because of affordability, we haven't really researched it, but the work was done by our engineering department. So it's an application in progress. It makes us resilient. It gives us our own power supply. And then actually, if we did receive $10 million in funding, what an amazing thing for our community to be resilient on our own power supply, where that if anything did happen because of climate change, we would be able to have our own depending on grid situation, but that could be a future working. About $10 million buys a lot of power. And the other thing I thought about was Wi-Fi. And, you know, it was hilarious that we did it at the railway park where we didn't have Wi-Fi. And it is, every time we have a conference there, people can't afford to go on Wi-Fi and your own Wi-Fi doesn't work. We have First Nations communities that have zero ability to connect to the internet. And these are the most basic, simple faculties of resilience and equity, is equity in education, equity in healthcare, and we have First Nations communities that can't connect to the internet. I find that astounding. And we didn't have fiber to our business park, which people had to actually pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it underneath the railway tracks and couldn't afford to. I'm not sure if that problem's been connected or if they gathered money collectively, but for a city that wants to empower economic development, the ability to be on the internet is critical to our healthcare, to our resilience, to our education. And I would say the number one thing for a smart city is to actually be connected. So we can have all those things, but if you're not connected, moving forward is difficult. I love circular economy. I think that we could build that into circular economy as well. There's, you know, when you start getting down smart cities avenues, it's a deep well, and there's a lot of things that are beneficial to a lot of people. But the one impact I thought was, energy and actually ability to connect.
So there is a significant energy component to this proposal. Of the 10, there's at least $2 million there. How that manifests,
Exactly.
it will be determined through the next iteration of the program.
I didn't want to lose that piece.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of things we've probably done that would fit nicely into this. The application is only so big and hits certain levels. I think the other thing is this isn't going to solve every problem we have in town, and connectivity is something we're working on, we need to do, period. This is just, and I would assume that that's a integral layer or a foundational layer to any moving forward of anything in the future, so absolutely.
If I may, I think fiber could be an integrated solution, or energy could be an integrated solution. The one thing that I want to go back to around this challenge is that it needs to be an innovation, and fiber is already happy in lots of municipalities, and some municipalities are taking ownership of their fiber. Right, and some aren't, and it depends on that strategy.
And fiber's a tool to get to the end.
Exactly. So I wouldn't want to focus an application on solutions. Definitely connectivity would be more of a problem identified, and then how we arrive at the solution is further down the road.
I just want to point out the hilarity of not being able to be connected.
Erin and Jason.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I know that a lot of hard work went into this report. It's really well researched. It's really interesting to read. I even went to the Scotland report. You piqued my curiosity. I think the theme you're recommending is the right one. I think it will be novel, especially for a community of our size. And I think in terms of information that I'd like to see as part of our proposal is just that we do have a zero waste strategy, and we have a very compelling problem with our landfill being full. And so there's a very real need for why we're trying to divert waste from that. And that didn't really come out in this report, but I don't want that to get lost. I think we forget in the regenerative and the circular economy, there's a real sense of the ability to be inclusionary in that. It builds neighborliness when, you build stratas where not everyone has to have a snow shovel or bikes, where you can start having shared economy even within neighborhoods and building, and looking at our infrastructure that way. So I think there's an opportunity to emphasize that part of
The social side,
benefit.
social inclusion. Okay.
And when something that I don't need, we have that community alive on Facebook, but like you were saying, we don't tie it all together.
Nothing's been formalized.
Yeah.
That's
the other one, in terms of partnerships, is looking at someone who can measure and monitor over the time social inclusion. Yeah. I think the UK now has like a minister of loneliness. Seriously, it's a huge problem.
It is the UK.
It's UK. But I know Vancouver was looking at social inclusion, and it'd be interesting to have a social studies or an academic institution that can help us look at that piece and ways to encourage it. And also seeing if we can partner at the provincial level with something like Multi-Material BC, because the more we keep resources circulating in the community, the less those suppliers have to pay to move materials to get recycled and to bring them back. So there's potentially an opportunity if we're looking at our partnership. I know we don't line those up, but in terms of looking at different ways.
And these partners that I put in just for the primary application phase, what we're supposed to do in the application is say, okay, these partners can drive these solutions or these goals and identify where there's gaps, and that's okay to have the gaps in this stage of the application. It's when we move into the next one that we have to figure out who fills those gaps.
And finally, the other piece of context is just our growth in the construction and deconstruction, because there's going to be so much waste coming from deconstructing the buildings of the 20th century to make way for what we need for this new step code.
Yeah.
And what do we do? I mean, some of the buildings here, even our own buildings, it's amazing to think about deconstructing and what we would do with all that waste after our real estate strategy report saying we have all these buildings at end of life. What do we do with that? So I think there's a very real need from that point of view, looking at this. So I'm happy to support this theme going forward.
Thanks, Jason and Ted.
I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about sort of the contrasting issues at play that went between the mobility theme versus the circular theme. And I was a bit more partial to the mobility theme. Urban planning background, I think, kind of led me in that direction, but also just the fact that what was really salient for me was that we are kind of a very unique community in terms of how fast we're growing, but our geographical isolation and the scale of our city. And so in terms of innovation and research, kind of thought that that might be one of the more obvious ones. But second to that, I guess, is my question around the circular economy. Sort of the reverse of that is, when you talk with the partners, how would you deal with as far as the scalability, recognizing that, in contrast to say like Lower Mainland, where you have a lot more variety of potential inputs and outputs, that in Squamish it's quite a bit more limited. And was there sort of an area that they were going to focus in, i.e. like the deconstruction? Because I actually think that's probably going to be our number one waste source. So just understanding the thought process. I mean, I think they're both really good ideas, but just wanting to make sure we, because the mobility is like sort of, other than affordable housing, mobility is the number one thing that I hear on a daily basis from folks. And maybe it also was more of an economic growth challenge. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is as far as my thoughts on when you measure it, the reduced commuting. I have a feeling that that's not going to happen just because we may increase the number of jobs in town, but our population growth rate is probably going to be higher.
Relative to the population.
Relative, okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
So just on that, Kate, maybe just speak quickly to why, and why mobility actually sort of came third in the three.
Sure.
And some of it has to do with competitiveness within this particular the funding and whether or not we'd be successful there or not. So maybe just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah,
And then, sorry, on that, I just still have Ted and Susan, and we're going to try to wrap this up. And I know everyone's waiting, but hopefully 5 or so minutes.
So after you, Mayor. For the mobility one, definitely was compelling to me as well as a resident, and also just looking at the feedback from the community and also our OCP goals. What put it in third place was exactly like Mayor Heinzman mentioned, that there's going to be lots of competition in the mobility space. And I think there's also going to be competition from like-sized communities or smaller communities, not as smaller than us, but smaller communities grappling with the same key topics. And the one thing that in discussions with staff also is just where we are today in terms of our mobility infrastructure and our mobility strategy versus other competing communities, which may be a little bit further beyond us. And so maybe it didn't set us up, in terms of our competitiveness necessarily, as well as some of the other areas that were suggested as themes. In terms of scalability for the circular economy, and you mentioned deconstruction, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well. I've been starting conversations exactly around what do the solutions look like, and if you did read the Scotland report and other reports around the circular economy, but the role that cities play, one of the key areas is around the built environment. So I'm hopeful because of course I'm talking right now to, for instance, UBC CERC. They are one department or one faculty at UBC, but there are others as well as BCIT who can definitely help us on the journey around our built environment. So I would anticipate, because the budget that I told you, the 10 million, was just made up in essence. It wasn't concrete in any way. I would anticipate that we would look at that as well as our wood waste, which I think is a unique problem for us, but it is actually a problem for other communities as well, and we would be a good model. And then in addition to that, we wouldn't ignore obviously waste diversion in general and clean energy. And we have a real opportunity in Squamish around clean energy, I think, with some of the projects and companies that are here, whether it be carbon engineering or our energy grid that we've applied for through NRCan with BCIT. I think we have lots of opportunities, as well as our potential UBC Clean Energy Campus. So.
Okay. I've got Ted and Susan, and then I'm looking for a resolution from
Yeah, thanks. Well, you just about hit it all, but I agree with the circular, and particularly because of the waste. And our recycling is not going to be, the way we see it now is not going to be the way it is in a very quick time. So anything around recycling and reusing and all that, to me, is the best one for our community.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks. I'm really interested in Nagar's comments on the Smart Cities Challenge. Nagar, the professor from Quest University, I would agree with her. I'm not sure, since we're coming to the vote, I'm just going to say right out that I've been skeptical about our ability to actually apply for this grant, our ability to actually resource properly all of this with staff being stretched. Also, really, we didn't go into this with a clear understanding of what Squamish's needs are as far as smart city initiatives. When I watched the panelists, there were 7 men presenting, most of them from outside the community. I didn't really see diversity in the applications. I don't know how those partnerships fit into our resilient circular economy. So I still am very, very unclear on what those partners have to do with any of this. Making a grid in Brennan Park or having those microenergy solutions on a micro scale costs a lot of money, and we have I will point again that applying for grants costs money, and when you don't have financials surrounding the decisions, you're actually placing staff resources and time into an application that we don't have a question. We have a little bit of a hypothesis, but it's based on, oh, look what Scotland's doing. I would like a Squamish-based solution based on what our resources are, what our needs are, and how to move forward. So I'm not sure, I still find it hard to make a decision for a $250,000 application that's leading to a $10 million application that's going to take a huge amount of resources. Just the fact of applying may be a really interesting needs assessment that gets us to a hypothesis of what we need that we can move forward to and actually fund in our budgets. But we also have to look at what we do with this information if we don't receive the money. And I have to say we should look at this application as work that we have to do in order, assuming that we're not going to receive the money, and hopefully come up with a solution that is not pie in the sky, local, so using local solutions, so that we're not looking to outside partners to solve Squamish solutions.
I'm looking for a motion, put the motion on the table. So the motion is what's on the report, Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I'll move that motion and speak to it if it's seconded.
Councillor Pryor, and I haven't actually spoken to this yet, so
Oh,
I'll just
sorry.
do it quickly. I think council went into this for precisely the reasons that Councillor Schell just said. If we happen to get this, it's bonus, it's gravy, it's icing. The intent was to start the conversations that we need to have about how this community is going to be resilient into the future. And so these, I think, are really valuable conversations and potential collaborations. At this point in the application, we don't know exactly how all those pieces fit together. But I think one of the things that I think makes our application quite strong is that we have a real diverse interest of collaborators, including two, the wood waste one that Eric's group is doing, as well as carbon engineering. And I was talking to the C.A.O. of carbon engineering, he said they want to take CO2 and be able to make the local beer using the local CO2. Like, that's just one little piece of how these conversations have started to evolve. And who wouldn't want to make, have beer with local CO2? And now we got everyone distracted. But anyway, I think this is really what is about. The reason why this particular one filtered to the top to me was because I think it actually hits on some of those other things within the other themes, particularly the mobility one. I suspect there's going to be mobility themes that come out of this, because fundamentally we need to get more jobs locally per capita and reduce the amount of commuters. And that is going to help with transportation issues and air quality issues and a whole bunch of other things that then feed into a more circular economy. So I think it's a unique approach. I actually think based on our policies that we've already developed, we have a really good foundation, and that, looking at the criteria, how they're going to evaluate this, I think regardless of our success, I think this has been a really valuable, interesting process and moves us along that continuum that we need to get to. Councillor Elliott. You're good? You're good? Councillor Pryor?
I'm good.
Susan?
I just have to say this out loud because it drives me crazy, the wood waste thing. That is the exact sort of thing where you don't really look at the full spectrum, and two proponents came up with an awesome idea that was like to use wood waste, but in Squamish we don't actually have enough wood waste to do those sort of initiatives. So really those sort of things, we really have to have the data and make it clear to the public and not say things like Squamish has a wood waste problem. We need to understand that our wood waste is being utilized in a really efficient way and an amazing way right now, but it's, the rest of our wood waste is.
Okay, I'm going to call a question.
It's crazy.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kate. And so, Kate, will we see the final statement back?
So on the 17th, I will provide an update with the confirmation of all the partnerships, and I'm hopeful that we're close to a final challenge statement, but that only gives me a week with the partners to set the targets.
Thanks, Kate. Good job.
Thanks.
Excellent
That's a great report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Come have a seat at the table. We are on to our seniors housing development. And I want to welcome the board of the Squamish Seniors Housing Society. And Laura, maybe I'll get you to just introduce your board, and I believe Naomi's here from Seniors Housing. How you doing? Good to see you. Come join us.
You're
That.
not asking about council members?
I liked it to see so.
Laura, are you leading this, or
All three of us.
all of you? Excellent.
Peter's going to start off, but
Okay.
we have to pull up our PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, why don't we take a 2-minute break? We'll allow you time to get up there.
Get set up.
2-minute break, Kelsey.
Okay.
Okay, we're back in our committee of the whole meeting, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor Heinzman and council, and thank you for having us today. We're really pleased to be here. We have with us Naomi Brunheim-Meyer from BC Housing, and I think some of you may know of, with other projects that are happening in Squamish. So, and we have also Craigie, Bill Rampol, Smith, Dennis having a senior's moment, and Laura, of course, and Kathleen Van Der Ree. and it's our pleasure to make this presentation. Ahead of it, we did have a meeting with Mayor Heinzman, and she asked at that time that maybe she thought council could benefit from learning more of the global perspective of our project and what we're doing and why we're doing it now. So we've kind of split the presentation into 3 sections, and we tried to keep it not very scripted, but we did take quite a while to put the program together for you today. So first of all, thank you, and welcome to our seniors housing. Our vision is to provide 232 new affordable housing rental homes for seniors of low and lower income through a P4 collaborative effort, including ourselves, the District of Squamish, BC Housing, and Mulligan. That's a little picture of what we're proposing on 3rd Avenue. And quickly, just a couple of key features. Again, 232 units. All units are 100% adaptable, all age and place type design. Generous 1-bedroom units. Our current project where we are now has 52 bachelor suites, which are rather small, 337 square feet, and 18 1-bedroom units that are 500 square feet. So we're moving it up a notch. Along with improved amenity spaces, including a generous location for the new men's shed, and I know they're going to be very happy there. Of course, a focus on energy efficiency and security, both very important issues to us, and a focus on our long-term ownership and efficient maintenance operations. So we hope to go at least 100 years with the new building instead of 50 years for our current ones. In fact, a little less than 50. Another important thing is we are collaborating with both the Squamish Nation and House on Women's Center to make units available for those folks. This is our board of directors. We have a wide variety of people from various backgrounds that serve on our board, and we feel that we've got a very functional and hardworking board to move forward with.
Okay.
So our challenges. This project as contemplated is quite large scale, and it is complex for a nonprofit society such as our own with limited development and construction experience. We also, for a project this size, have limited financial capacity, and we have a requirement for government funding to make it work. Because it's a lower rent type project, we need a significant cash equity portion to allow that the cash flow from the lower rents will carry our mortgage. So that's the challenge that we're trying to make as we go forward in planning the development. Today's presentation will cover our 4 partners, a section on our aging facility, a section on our large waiting list, a very quick review of what the Richmond Kiwanis are doing, very quick. And then we'd like to go, we'll outline our 2 options that we feel are available to us to go forward. And then we'd like to go in camera to discuss in some detail with you our financial proposal and key reasons to proceed. So on the proposed P4, there's ourselves. We've been the Seniors Housing Society in Squamish since 1972. We feel we've got a very capable board of directors and have had for some time. We're the provider of 70 affordable units at the present time. Our priority is always offered to Squamish seniors and to seniors with family in Squamish. And we are also the owner of 2 sites currently, and we have a cash equity reserve of $1 million for new development. Number 2, BC Housing. They have offered financial support for our project, currently at $6 million. They will provide the important interim financing during construction at a very low interest rate. They will also provide the long-term mortgage after the building is completed. And they provide us with development and operational assistance. And as they have stated to us on a number of occasions, they have a good relationship with Polygon, meaning they have a lot of confidence in their ability for this type of project. Partner number 3 is the District of Squamish. Council support and expedited approvals for going forward. Again, these would be things that you would have to decide for yourselves, so we understand. And a contribution of close to $3.5 billion in CACs from the Polygon sale back to our project. A waiver of application fees and other fees and charges, and a waiver of property taxes ongoing, understandably subject to biannual review of council. And number 4 is Polygon, as proposed. Interesting that Michael O'Dane, the chair of Polygon, had some of his very first nonprofit projects right here in Squamish, back in the time with the Dave Barrett government in the 1970s. He was the Assistant Deputy Minister of Housing at that time, and all of the Ross Road development and the housing co-op on Arrowwood up there was Sprackenhatz. That was Michael O'Dane's kind of mentorship to get that through. They've built more than 26,000 homes, successful partnerships with the universities. They did their Winchman Kiwanis Club project. They have Squamish building experience, and they are trusted both by us and with BC Housing to deliver as promised. Laura.
Well, we're going to go into the aging facility next, and for whatever reason, I'm missing a slide. So that would be my mistake.
You just showed up.
Our
Pass it
aging.
around.
Hold on a sec.
That's what you're looking for?
Yeah, I know, but we're missing.
Okay. Well,
We're missing the 2 pages, but I can go through this because it's all up here. So we're looking at 2 buildings that are approaching the end of their useful life. The Cedars are 48 years old. The Manor is about 45 to 46 years old. And what we're looking at right now is electrical systems, plumbing systems, and roof structures that are starting to fail. And we've recently did a roof assessment, and there is some work that needs to be done. We're constantly having to repair pinhole leaks that are happening in all the buildings, and they just, oftentimes you don't recognize them until it's too late. They're very sneaky little things, and by the time you notice it, it's gone down 3 stories. And then you have stuff like this where there's the mold and the remediation required from all of that water being in the building for a while. So this is an example here of the damages that often happen due to plumbing failures. On average, I'd say we are having failure in the plumbing system at least once every 2 months now. So if you look at what a complete refit of plumbing is going to cost, it's really not worth spending all that money on a building that's approaching the end of its useful life. We're also having some small problems with electrical. Luckily, we have amazing plumbing and electrical people that come in and take care of everything as it comes up. But the bottom line is that we're spending more and more repairs and maintenance money every year to keep these buildings going. And at some point, you have to say, when do we stop with this? So that's just an example of some of the things that we're dealing with. This is another one that I'm not too fond of, which you guys may know what that is. For those of you that don't know, here it is again. Now, we're not the only building in Squamish that has this problem, and it's not just about old buildings. There are some new buildings that have them too. And one of the things that I'm very excited about in the new building is we won't have this problem anymore, because part of that whole program is a bed bug sauna. Yes, they do have these things. And they're also going to be using diatomaceous soil in between all the units. So it actually will stop the spread of these awful things.
Stop the spread.
So yes, I will say right now that our buildings are in good condition with respect to these critters, but this is something that aging facilities have to deal with all the time. And you have to stay on top of it. So the next one is our waiting list. And I know that I'm pretty sure every one of you sitting at this table has heard me talk about our waiting list, which literally gets bigger and bigger every week. So we're sitting at 152. See, even since I just added the last edition of this, there's 2 more on the wait list. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is obviously why we need to start thinking about doing something right now, because the need is now. If I had to stick with the buildings and not have anything coming down the pipe, I'm telling people 10 years. If we don't build anything, someone will wait on our wait list 10 years before they get into the Cedar or the Manor. And that's if the Cedar and the Manor last that long, which it won't. So, just going to briefly touch on the Richmond Kiwanis housing, which is the Polygon partnership that the Kiwanis Housing in Richmond did. And we had the chance to go through these buildings twice, and they're really quite spectacular. So a similar situation, 2-story buildings, very low density, and getting quite old and run down. 122 rental units built on 5 acres. And so it took the Richmond Kiwanis group quite a while to, proceed, because they looked at all these different options. They came back to the table, away from the table, back to the table, and they finally recognized that the partnership with Polygon was the best thing for them. And today, it's quite incredible what they've managed to do with 2 towers, 296 units. They're all, they're really well laid out. In fact, we're using the same layout that the Kiwanis has in our, because they just work so great. They're all fully accessible, wonderful units. So it was a huge, huge success story with the Kiwanis group. And that was one of the reasons why we just went, this is something we really want to look at closely, because if we can do something like this with a developer partner and triple our capacity, why wouldn't we look at that closely? So I think...
Before you maybe explain how 232 units does open up more space for us in the
Oh, absolutely. And this is one thing that I've had people say to me is like, okay, if you have a big wait list and you build this building and then you fill it, then what's going to happen then? So based on our current turnover, unfortunately, there is turnover in suites. People move on in the housing continuum. They move with family, or some other things may happen.
Some people die.
Yeah. So based on my current turnover rate, and when I adjust it for the ratio to 232 units, once the building gets filled, which it would be filled, because there will be enough people to fill it, but we'll also be opening up about 15 units a year based on turnover rates. Also, with no wait list, the people aren't going to be waiting 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years. They'll be waiting maybe 6 months to a year. And there's always going to be that turnover. So I anticipate that we are going to meet the needs of the housing for seniors for many, many years with this building. It's not just going to be, oh, it's full and where's everyone else going to go? It's definitely going to continue to meet the needs. I think it's Kathleen's turn.
It is. So,
Click.
Okay, so what are our options? We've heard that doing nothing probably isn't an option. We've got a couple years left for the Cedars, and we obviously have a wait list that exceeds what we can provide as is. So we did turn our energy to a couple of options. The first one predates my tenure on the board, but there was a plan where we would build a new project on the gravel lot that is adjacent to the current development. That would be 30 to 40 units with a net gain, I guess, of about 10 to 20 units, because keeping in mind we're losing the Cedars at some point because they don't make sense to keep patching the holes. So that is the one option. The other option is, of course, the project that we're talking to you about today, which is the land swap with a developer partner to build the land. So the part that's one of the appealing parts of this project is that we don't have to relocate the residents while the new building is being constructed. The developer will build on our other property. Once the units are constructed, our current tenants move in, new tenants move in, and then so there isn't 2 years of putting people in hotels that don't exist here. Then the new partner takes on with their own redevelopment.
I think this is the part where we
so-
actually have
Yeah.
to.
This is the time we want to get into our financial.
Well, why don't we answer some questions on what's been presented, Councilor Pryor?
Yeah, thank you. So, the seniors group was the first board I ever sat on. And those buildings back then were on their last leg. And so I used to go in and fix some of those kitchens, and so I know that. So the property taxes that you're talking about, or you mentioned there, I just wonder how long would they be kind of looked at being reduced? You're asking us that property taxes would be,
We haven't been paying property tax.
Yeah, there is no
We
problem.
haven't.
Yeah, we've been exempt. We apply,
okay.
we do the
All
process
right,
of
no, that's good.
application, but we've never paid them.
Yeah,
And
there's no
then-
property tax.
And then
There
another,
would be if Polygon redeveloped the new lot. there would
Yeah,
be
that's
property
correct.
tax.
yeah.
Yeah,
But on our side,
Yeah.
And then also with the older buildings, there's the inefficient heating systems.
Mhm.
And, you know, that heat's just going straight out through.
Straight out.
And with that new building, that wouldn't happen.
I think we can get to the base level. We know the manor and the cedar need to be replaced.
Yeah,
Everyone is
okay.
there.
So now, would there be a rent increase from the old place to the new place for the people?
yeah, there would be. But again, it would still fall really with it. It's going to be really affordable compared to one-bedroom unit in Squamish. We're looking at between $750 to $775.
Yeah.
And you cannot find that anywhere. Also, that's the lower rate, that's for safer.
Yeah.
So those people can also apply for safer. So that would bring down that $775 rental rate to maybe $575 or $500, depending. It's all geared towards someone's individual
Because right
income.
now, some of the people in there are on a percentage of their income.
Not anymore, because we paid off our mortgage recently, so we are no longer
Oh, okay.
have that program.
And
So
then-
everyone's on safer right now.
Well, I know a couple of the guys in there, and they were worried about the rent increase,
Absolutely, but
cutting into their beer money.
it's still going to be very, very affordable, very affordable.
Okay. And also on the swap deal, there's nothing to say that in the next phase there isn't going to be seniors.
Well, I believe Polygon is making all those units accessible
Yeah.
for seniors as well, so,
Right.
yeah.
But they just wouldn't be.
They'd be market.
Part of this society. And
Yeah.
they'd be thank you. I have Susan, Jason, and then Doug.
Thanks. I do really like this proposal. I'm just wondering about the density. I'm wondering why it didn't go up to 8 floors. If it was possible with zoning to go to 8 floors and add a little bit more density for seniors in, to trade, I can't see construction costs being that much more for 2 more floors, but the land trade is significant for market housing right now. And everything about it, and so that one question is why not go up 2 more floors and create the density right away so that you actually have a few more units for the future. And the other thing is the family rooms, they're all 1 units and bachelors. Is there space when people have family visiting where a family can stay?
Yep.
Excellent, I was just wondering.
Okay, I'll take a crack at the first question, if you will. If we added another 115 units with 2 extra floors, which is fair enough, there's the extra cost would require extra equity. I mean, quite a bit of extra equity. And because we've got to have this ratio for our mortgage, we've got to keep that balance there at all times, right? So we think we've reached the optimum size for our property, given the realities of what conceivably we think can be available for us in terms of equity contribution. appreciate that if maybe you gave the other properties some density bonusing and so on. Yes, we could probably, but I don't know that the amount would be such that it would help us that much more, but I guess I would leave it that if we could get down to some, it has to get down to discussions between yourselves and the developer. Well, what were you contemplating on density and all, all that stuff. And we're almost ready to go. I'd hope that we could get this part of the conversation done, but I'm not going to cut that off. But there's a lot to just adding 2 floors to the building. It's quite a significant step up, but.
You have partners with the House and Women's Center, there's other,
Yeah, they don't
there's the
contribute
Squamish
any
Nation
funding
as well,
to
so
us.
I'm just wondering, I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
that, but there are ways to work out equity.
I might actually explain there's a difference between a 6-story building and an 8-story building. It's a form of construction.
Exactly.
So you stay within a wood frame building when you're on this side, you turn into a concrete building when you
I
go to
thought it
8.
was between 4 and 6, so I thought.
No, so 6 is still a
6 and
wood.
8.
Yeah, so you said 6 and 8, right? So, yeah, so what you do is you actually change the form of construction, which is a costly. So in fact, you shouldn't go to 8, you should actually go to 12. Right, so that you're
I'd like that even more. For senior housing, I would like that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so it's actually a form of
Thank you.
construction that doesn't, at that level, it doesn't.
I thought it was between 4 and 6,
Yeah.
but
It's
no,
between
it's 6
it's
between.
after
Thank
6.
you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was a recent building code change, maybe 6 years ago to go to 6. So it requires a little bit of extra cost already to go to 6.
Foundation
You
as
need-
well.
You need additional structural support to get to 6-story, but you still stay within a wood frame construction, which is really what Polygon's, frankly, is
So
their bread and
basically not wood
butter,
frame
which is what they,
construction.
and what they do really well, and what they can, provide a cost efficiencies, and what they know what their market is. But the Kiwanis building, a much smaller footprint, went up with the towers. So keep in mind, you're getting
I was
232.
just jealous of the Kiwanis building.
It's only 296 though, right? So it's not like the actual number of units.
It looks way bigger, but it
Yeah,
is.
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jason?
Yeah, can you tell us, as far as eligibility for these units, what are the eligibility? Because obviously it's targeting a certain bracket of population, but how does it work as far as I'm thinking in particular, senior citizen who perhaps they have a single family home or they have a condo or something and they want to downgrade to the rental. Are there asset limits or how does that work?
Yes, there's a whole big calculation around that. But basically, okay, so we look at people over 55, and that's the age cutoff. And then generally speaking, we look at people in Squamish first, or have family in Squamish, and then we look at the Sea to Sky corridor. But I've also, one of the things you have to be is a BC resident for at least 1 year. So with respect to assets, when it comes to looking at income, I'm going to use basically the same kind of guidelines that BC Housing uses, which is, say they do have assets, they sold their condo, they have $200,000 in the bank. So you would take 1% of what that asset is worth, divided by 12, and then add it to the monthly income. So that adds to what their income shows up as. And with respect to income testing, so there's 2 different layers of rents. There's the lower safer rents, and then there's the 80% of market rents. So it's a 50-50 split of what we have to work with right now. So basically anyone, say under $3,000 a month in income, would be eligible to apply for the lower rate. Anyone over $3,000, which would be a lot of married couples, would bring in more than $3,000, they would be at the higher rate of 80% of market. And ideally, as we pay down the mortgage over time, we would hopefully want to bring on more safer units so that we can, give more to the lower end of the,
So
Yeah.
our financing, Councillor Blackman Jason, okay, thank you. We look at it as a ceiling. So by accessing construction financing from us and by accessing the grant funds that are available for the project, we look at it as a ceiling, and then we look to the mandate of the society. So we keep it, our definition is very broad in terms of low to moderate, and so sometimes a municipality may require a more stringent rent rule, maybe the mandate of the society requires a more, and so we're somewhat flexible in terms of what we do in terms of income and asset testing to allow for the most flexible approach. And typically, our goal is clearly to deepen affordability. That would be our first priority, but it's also because we are the lender as well, we look at creating a scenario that allows that project to be viable. And so that's what they're currently, what their current pro forma allows for is that blended model of 50% of quite a discount with the SAFER benefit, of which you're allowed to access SAFER and still come to us for construction financing, and then the other elements would be at a higher level. So when we move into the conversation around affordability, we may have some news around that, or we move into the closed portion. I'd be interested to share some news from us. Okay, thanks.
In an ideal world, we would have loved to start it off with a 75% safer and 25% affordable, but we have to do what the numbers allow us to do. And so we're fortunate, we're feeling grateful for 50-50, but we'd love to get it up, so, yeah.
Thanks. You made the comment about 3.45 million CACs from Polygon sale towards the project, and I wonder if you could just elaborate on that. Are you talking about the other building, the CACs that would be generated from that?
Correct.
Being given to the society, and that is part of your equity, I take it?
Correct.
And that's a 6-floor building? Is that all the CACs that would come out of that building?
That's the total number of units. That the current, I don't know if the planning department can comment on that,
Okay,
but
yeah.
it's within what they've been discussing with the municipality about. Yeah, that number therefore could move a little bit back and forth depending on what the final number works out to with the city.
And do you know, they're proposing a 6-story building for that site? I think we saw this once before and I just forgot.
I don't actually want to get into the Polygon, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Whether or not CACs from that project goes to this is a big part of this conversation.
Correct.
We just had a report that said we have $100 to $120 million of facilities that we need to invest in the next 5 years to 10 years. So we have lots of uses for CACs, and so that's absolutely part of it, but I don't want to get into Polygon at this point. All right, Doug, any more questions?
No, that's good.
Any more questions, Council? Don't see any. Move for motion to close. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. All right, we're back in our meeting, and Laura and Peter, do you want to?
Well, we can wrap up rather quickly. We just have a few more slides. I don't know that it's necessary to read everyone off, but because all of it's been discussed already at the meeting, but these are the key reasons we believe that the project should proceed right now. Unless you want me to stop and do it, you're going to get a handout with all of this on it.
Awesome.
Okay. And the same with the summary. We just be trying to tell you, now's the time, let's go. We think it's great, and it is. And the final slide is the timelines we anticipate that would start, assuming everything goes forward from this day forward.
Nice.
And the truly final slide is back to happy faces at Squamish Seniors Housing.
Especially Laura.
That's Betty. She gave me permission to share her.
We do have a happy group of residents there. And we do have a wonderful executive director to keep them happy. Along with Sue here. Sue is also another one. And so we do sincerely appreciate the time that you've afforded us today. I think it has been a good idea to get together like this and discuss it with you. And certainly if there's any questions any of you have going forward, we're most available to do so and answer. And so, yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Well, I just want to thank the senior board for all the hard work they've been doing for all these years.
100%. All right, motion to terminate, moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody.